officers, are we ready? Are we going live? Thank you. Welcome to RBKC's Licensing Subcommittee, and thank you for attending. This hearing is being live streamed. I'm Councillor Laura Burns, and I'll be chairing this meeting. The committee for this meeting comprises of Councillor Priti Hudd and Councillor Linda Wade and myself. We are joined by Dave Williams from the Council's licensing team. Our legal officer is Lindsay Lemessier. Also with us are our committee officers, Jerome Trehan, Nimka Mahudin, Danielle Hele, and Tommy Hanmer. Before we start the hearing of this case, just a few ground rules. Please keep your microphones on mute until you're invited to speak, as only 2 microphones can be used at any one time. Please make sure your mobile phones are on silent. Everybody. Great. Thank you. The case before us today is to vary the licence of Ixchel's 33H Kings Road, London, SW3 4LX. Now for declarations of interest. I confirm that I have no declaration of interest to make regarding this item. Do the other members have any declarations to make? Councillor Hudd? No, thank you. Councillor Wade? No. Great. Thank you, colleagues. Okay, for clarity, I will briefly outline the procedure of the meeting, which has already been circulated with papers. First, the licensing officer, Mr. Williams, will give a brief outline of the application. Please could you confirm your attendance?
Good morning, Chair.
Morning, thank you. Then I will ask the applicant's legal advisor, Mr. James Rankin, to present his submission. He will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes to do so. He is joined by his instructing solicitor, Mr. Thomas
O'Mayline.
Thank you. And his clients, Mr. Fraser Cutthrows, and that's it. The other one's not here. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay. Who may be able to assist members should they have any questions. Please could you confirm your attendance?
We are all here.
Perfect, thank you. The next questions may be asked by members of the committee, legal officer and objectors of the applicant. The questions will be asked by the applicant of the responsible authority. Next, the objectors, Ms. Virginia Stephen, Mr. David Manuel, Mr. Andrew Harmstone, Mr. Graham Huntley and Mr. Banu Frakelli.
Yes. That's Miss Fraquelli.
Fraquelli, sorry. Thank you. Will present their objections. They will have up to a maximum of 10 minutes each to do so. But the committee would be grateful if you do not each cover the same point. Please could you all confirm your attendance?
We're all here, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions, then questions may be asked of the members of the committee, the legal officer, the applicant, of the objectors. After this, we will ask our legal officer, Ms. Lemessier, to deal with any further questions she may have, and then she will lead on the draft conditions session. The list of potential conditions have been circulated to all parties prior to the hearing. Please could you confirm your attendance?
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Then finally, we will turn to the governance team to see if any issues have been raised that we need to consider. There will be no summing up and the meeting will end. I would like to remind everyone that the committee has read the papers which comprise the main pack and the additional submissions that have been circulated to the parties. So there is no need to repeat their content, but please do draw attention to certain points and pages. Let's get going. Mr. Williams, can you please outline the case for us and advise if there has been any additional documentation received?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. Today's application has been submitted by Ixchel London Limited for a variation of the premises licence in respect of Ixchel at 33H Kings Road, London Southwest 3 4LX. The current licence permits the sale by retail of alcohol on the premises from 0800 hours to 23:30 hours and late night refreshment from 2300 hours to midnight 7 days a week. The applicant is seeking to vary the hours for the sale of retail by alcohol on the premises on a Thursday to Saturday from 0800 hours to 0100 hours, and late night refreshment Thursday to Saturday from 2300 hours to 0100 hours. There are no other changes requested. A summary of the proposed hours and conditions can be found on page 5 and 6 of today's main bundle. The licensing authority has received 17 representations opposing this application, 1 from a councillor, 2 from residents' associations, being the Duke of York's and Royal Hospital Area Residents Interest Group and White Lands House Residents Association, and 14 from local residents. A summary of those representations can be found on page 6 of the main bundle, and a copy of the full representations can be found at Appendix C. The licensing authority has also received 11 representations in support of the application. A summary of those representations can be found on page 7 of the main bundle, and a copy of the full representations can be found at Appendix D. Council records show that at the time this report was written, 4 noise/nuisance complaints had been received in the preceding 24 months, 1 relating to noise nuisance and 3 relating to smells. The report states there have been 12 temporary event notices submitted in the past 12 months, but there have actually been 23. Some have been for basement only, some have been for ground floor only, and some have been for all the premises. Also, additional 10s have been submitted since the time of writing this report. The Planning Department has not made a formal representation in connection with this application, but as an informative for the subcommittee, the Planning Department has confirmed that there is no conflict between the planning history for the site and what is proposed. Other than the list of proposed conditions that are to be considered if the committee were minded to grant the application, there have been 4 additional documents circulated for this hearing. Sorry, that should read 5 additional documents. 2 emails from objectors and 3 emails with submissions from the applicant. This concludes the summary of today's application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Now for the applicant's case. Mr. Ranking, can you please advise if you have any amendments to your application?
There are amendments to the application in respect of conditions, but not in respect of the hours that are sought. Do you want me to address you on the conditions at the end?
Yes, at the end.
I take it then that you've read my submissions. 9-page document. I'm simply going to speak to those really quickly. Ixchel was the Mayan goddess of the moon. These premises opened in November 2023, and Mr. Carruthers, who has an extensive background in hospitality, is the brainchild behind it. £3.2 million was raised in order to create a 150-cover restaurant. It's on the basement and the ground floor, and it has 2 ancillary bars, 1 on each floor. There's mention in the papers that Mr. Carruthers wants to start a nightclub, and this effectively is a prelude to that, an extension of 1 hour on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays for the purposes of feeding and watering diners does not, we suggest, herald the arrival of a nightclub. It's certainly true to say that in the past, Mr. Carruthers was involved in nightclubs. He sold Albert's, which is referred to in the papers, in 2017. But just by way of an example of his diversification, he is a hotel owner in Earl's Court, the Mayflower Hotel. He owns a golf club, which he's just bought in Cirencester, and so on and so forth. But this is not, and I will repeat that, not going to be a nightclub. I'll grasp a nettle right from the outset. There's no question that the economic storm clouds, which are swirling round hospitality at the moment, are becoming ever more ferocious. And there is no doubt that hospitality in central London is on its knees. There are all sorts of reasons for that, and certainly the most recent budget did not help. And what Mr. Carruthers seeks to do is to make the most he possibly can of his premises. Currently the position is this, that he can turn his tables twice in the evening. And he believed that he was able to turn them 3 times. And in order to make sure that that was so and that there was a foundation for that. That was the reason behind applying for all those temporary events notices, some 23 in total. The purpose behind all of that was to prove to himself and also to you and to residents that what he envisages for these premises will take place. And what he wanted to do was to see whether there was an appetite for a third sitting, and there is. The current position is that at midnight he is having to usher existing diners away from the premises. And so the purpose behind this application is twofold. Firstly, to let those existing diners remain, and secondly, to allow a third sitting, so that diners will be encouraged to vacate their tables and to move to the ancillary bars and to finish their evening there. It's important to stress that these are ancillary bars. Nobody from the street can come in and just order a drink. You can order a drink if you're waiting for your table, if you're waiting for your other guests to arrive, and you're entitled to a drink after you've had your dinner, in common with many premises that we know of. Now, importantly, there has been not one complaint in relation to those temporary events notices. There's mention by Mr. Huntley, unfairly if I may say so, that the reason that there's been no complaint is that these temporary events notices were never used. They were all used, every single one of them. And they were all to the terminal hour that we seek. In other words, 1 additional hour on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays, except for Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve, when the applications for 10s went to 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock. So there has been one noise complaint. That was on the 15th of November last year. That was opening night, and the complaint related to the scraping of bottles. And a letter was sent by your efficient licensing department 2 days later, and there has been no repeat of that. What there has been a complaint about is smell originating from these premises. Now, there's a difficulty with that, because when Mr. Carruthers installed his extraction system, it was and is state of the art. But some residents complained. Officers from the council went round and inspected. And there is no doubt in their minds that these premises and the smell that originates from these premises is not such, in their professional view, that it impacts on the lives of the residents. Now remember please that these are your principal sources of intelligence and information on matters relating to noise and to nuisance, and you have to place great weight on the evidence that they have provided in their packs. And what was said at the pre-application meeting, before this application was lodged, what was said then was that we've had no complaints, and what was said at the most recent residents meeting, attended by only 2 ward councillors and 1 resident on the 4th of November, that there had been no noise complaints. In relation to those meetings, there have been 4 of those. The licence requires only 2 in a calendar year, and they've been detailed in my submissions. The residents have said, well, we asked for some of these meetings. That is certainly so. The requirement is only that these meetings are held, and we are voluntary participants in that whole process. The chronology relating to what Mr. Carruthers has done, over and above what is required of him in law in relation to the extraction system, is detailed in our bundle at page 17 to 18, where despite the fact that officers are saying there is no odour nuisance, he has gone a stage further, and he upgraded his system, and you can see this in our bundle at page 17 to 18. Spent £27,000 upgrading it, And in addition to that, the servicing and the changing of filters and so on and so forth is an additional £17,000. He spent £43,000 addressing something which is not an issue so far as your officers are concerned. I have to grasp a nettle on what I'm going to call the Cheltenham Terrace incident. There is no doubt that an incident took place on the 27th of May this year. There's no doubt that it involved one of our staff, who was the former DPS, Mr. Virane, and there's no doubt that his conduct that evening was far from satisfactory, and as a result, he was let go. And from that moment, we installed security, Cadogan Security, a reputable firm that provides security for most of the King's Road, provide an SIA doorman at these premises. There's reference made to them not being vigilant enough. We've heard that from the residents this morning and in their most recent emails, and we shall be ever vigilant to ensure that they carry on in accordance with the dispersal policy. I should also mention that there is a question of retaining customers inside whilst they're waiting for their Ubers, and we've got to be more vigilant on that as well. So I mention in my submissions this question of precedent, because it appears that what the residents, and I don't want to put words into their mouths, fear most is that the granting of this 1 hour extra will in some way set a precedent, and that every single licensed premises in the King's Road will be hammering on your door, demanding what is theirs, and pointing to Ixchel and saying, well, they got it, we want it too. I've made reference, and you obviously will have legal advice on this, that having regard to what may or may not happen in the future is not a proper consideration. You have to look at this application on its merits. I mentioned the case of Mead and the Brighton Corporation. So, having raced through all of that, I've got conditions which I can address you on now. Do you think that's the appropriate time?
If you just do a précis, but we'll properly go through the conditions later on, but it might be useful for the residents to know what you're suggesting.
Well, I spoke to the residents this morning, Mr. Huntley in particular, and if you turn to my submissions, it's on page 8 and 9. I've listed the conditions there. Now, for some reason, the amendment that is on page 9 at Roman numeral 3 there, which says amend condition 32 to read from 2200 hours until midnight each day, there should be no more than 15 smokers from the premises. And then that's coupled with Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays. After midnight, there should be 5 smokers. Now, for some reason, and I'm not sure where the confusion has arisen, if you look at the suggested conditions, as they're proposed in this document, it would seem to have this effect, that you would only have a restriction for 15 smokers from Sunday to Wednesday, and then on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays you've got unrestricted smokers, which we don't want, until midnight when you've got 5. Can I suggest this, that you take your pens and strike out the words Sunday to Wednesday, replace those words with the words that have been struck out, each day, and then insert midnight. So it would read, as my condition reads in my submissions, from 2200 hours till midnight each day, no more than 15 smokers from the premises shall be permitted to smoke outside the premises, etc., etc. I've explained this really clumsily. And then after midnight on Thursdays, Fridays and Saturdays, when we hope we'll have our extension that would be limited to 5. Now, speaking to Mr. Huntley this morning, he said, is there any chance that you could cut down on the numbers of smokers? But 15 is a maximum. And as a gesture of goodwill, may I offer this, that we would cut it down to, say, 10. But the reality is that that still gives us a great deal of comfort, because it's rare that you will see that number outside. There's reference in the papers to unstable management, and we take issue with that. There's reference to somebody called Mr. Manketlo, who had a meeting with the residents, which Mr. Carruthers was not present at, 3 months before the premises opened. And I think what was suggested at that meeting was that Mr. Manketlo offered some form of assurances that there would be no application to extend the hours. Mr. Carruthers was not privy to that meeting and doesn't know what was said and what wasn't said. You okay?
Yep, you have reached your 10 minutes.
I thought
Thank
I had. All right, there we go. I've got Mr. Carruthers here to answer any questions that you might have.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to ask a couple of questions and then I'll pass over to the committee. Just to kind of get a clearer idea, what is the average time for a table turnaround? So how long does it take for maybe a party to consume?
Good morning, first of all. It kind of depends on the size of the table, but generally we kind of do 2 hours for a table. Larger parties might be slightly longer than that, but you know, tables of 2 might be an hour and a half. So it really varies depending on what. But you normally give the people booking in the time limits that, you know, if they booked in, say at 10:30, you would make them aware of what time they'd have to vacate the table at.
Thank you. And your capacity is 150 covers. So how does that work when you have people sort of at the bar, either pre or post drinking? How does that work? How do you fit?
Sorry, the 150 actually includes the bar spaces as well. That's pretty much like, I think without that there's probably about 130 actual tables, and then it's the bar seats as well, which we do have people eating at the bars as well.
Yeah, that was my next question. What is are they seated at the bar, or is it a standing area, but up and down?
There's plenty of seats around the bar. There are some people that do stand next to those seats as well. Again, I think I can't remember exact licensing, sorry, but the bars are never particularly busy.
Okay, and on that front, can you just give us a breakdown of the dispersal? Obviously, we have got your policy here, but I'd like to hear it from you, your step-by-step, and how does that work, and also your SIA covering 150 people.
Yes, so the SIA, we decided to bring on ourselves anyway after the incident which was mentioned earlier. We felt, you know, our close proximity to 4 nightclubs in the borough, we thought it was a smart move, because people turning up intoxicated at the door, we felt we needed that. Obviously a large bit of their remit is to noise dispersal. So first of all, we make sure that no one goes down Walpole Street at all. The main job of the SIA is to direct people onto the King's Road, obviously managing the numbers that we've got on our licence as well. That said, I don't think we've ever had 15 people outside. We normally, the waiters on the tables will, when bills are being paid, will instruct people, you know, if you're ordering a car, you know, please, you know, wait here until the car's arrived, and then we'll take you outside. And again, the reception also know to do that. And if groups are leaving and they've stood up, and we will still, again, give them that secondary, if your car's not here yet, please wait inside. As you know, some people, they'll see their car 1 minute away and we'll walk outside, so there occasionally might be a 30-second, 1-minute transition period, but we do our end of making sure that we give them the options, and we keep relaying that we're in a neighbourhood area. And like I say, everything is directed to the King's Road. We're very sensitive on Walpole Street. There's no, obviously, all smoking obviously is all put onto King's Road, and you know, all people leaving are ushered onto the King's Road immediately to disperse down towards the train station, or if they have ordered an Uber, into their car.
Thank you. One moment. Thank you. Okay. Any questions from Councillor Hudd?
Good morning, Mr. Curtis. Thank you for being here. I will save most of my questions once I've listened to the objectors, because I've read the papers. What you represent is a case of sort of quite harmonious existence, but it obviously is not the case. And it's, so, you know, I think maybe I reserve my questions later on. On your capacity, could you tell me, just clarify what the chair has just asked you. Is 150 your full capacity, standing and seated, or there could be 150 seated and then there could be people at the bar?
So our kind of restaurant tables, not including bar tables, bar space would probably be about 130. I would say our probably capacity would be 150. I've never seen actually over 150 covers in, normally even on a busy night like a Saturday night, maximum people in there is normally about 120 to 130 at one time. We've never exceeded the 150. Obviously there's gaps in between tables and things like this, so it's not two seatings, so there's always space in there, but 130 I would say were restaurant design tables, and then you've got your bar space tables as well, which, you know, some people like that informalish way of eating as well. But yeah, it's 100 and 130 plus I'd say the 20 seats at the bar. But again, I've never once seen it on our 7 rooms accounts, which gives us a live up to date how many people inside the venue, and normally we're, even on the busiest night of the week, between 120 and 130 would be, you know, mass.
Could I ask a supplementary question arising out of that? When you had the 10s, that additional hour that you had between 12 and 1, what were the numbers you were seeing there? What was the capacity that you were operating to?
Realistically, it would be between probably 75 and 100. It's certainly not the busiest time of the evening. Our busiest time is between 7 and 8:30, 9. That's the kind of our busy period. But there's certainly, you know, 70 to 100 people, which we would still be in there and have that customers. So that's kind of where we're at. But it's probably 60%, 60, 75% of where we would be at our busiest.
Thank you. Could you also remind me, your ancillary bar, is it in the basement or is it on the ground floor?
We actually have a bar on each floor. So
each floor,
yeah,
right?
two
Okay.
bars.
So when your seating changes, the people move to the bar in the basement, or they have a choice?
It really varies. It depends where there's space. So it depends. A lot of people obviously might have their drink before they sit for dinner. And it depends where there's space, so the reception will see where to put them, and then after dinner the same thing goes. Where there's space, we'll move them to one of our 2 bars should they finish dinner and want a nightcap before they go on their way.
And the disbursement, obviously the disbursement policy hasn't worked very well to date, and I live in an area where I'm surrounded by pubs, so I know, as a resident. So obviously there's been, it hasn't been successful. So you are suggesting one of the conditions that you would agree is the SIA security guards. And the other thing I will also mention is, I know you mentioned that when the Ubers and all the pickups are well orchestrated, but it obviously is not the case right now. Would you agree with that?
Well, on your first point, yes, to the SIA, we've actually initiated that off our own back regardless, and that's why we're happy to offer it. We do think it serves a benefit in the area. I do think we can improve on the dispersal policy, but that said, I do think we have managed it relatively well to date as well, but I do think there's room for improvement. We do listen when there has been conversations, and we very much know that the the area is Walpole Street that we need to, you know, our immediate neighbours. So we do, you know, aim very much at Kings Road. But I think overall, I think, you know, the evidence on noise complaints and things like this hasn't been there. So I do think we've managed it relatively well, but obviously there is room to improve, and we will endeavour to keep improving.
And finally, just to confirm, are you saying, in your summation, sir, you mentioned that the fans have been the state of the art, they've just been renovated at a huge cost of 43,000. So are you saying that's the maximum you can do and there's no further improvement that can be done to the fans to avoid the smells?
Oh, sorry, on the... so we're always working. We're actually just engaged a new company right now to get their opinion. We've had 2 different upgrades with, again, I'm not that technical on this, so apologies if I get this wrong, but we've had 2 different ozone systems and UV systems put in place. So we're always working away on that. We're taking advice. We've got the management team now know to do extra cleaning as well for filters from our end, not just the professionals that we bring in. We've got 2 different professional companies which service them. Because they all need to be serviced by different things. So we are always trying to improve it, and I think that's, you know, from my perspective, when it was suggested that we haven't listened, that's why I just felt that was not fair, because we are trying to improve it, and, you know, we are always seeking, and if there was something that I could do to completely eliminate, then, you know, we would do it tomorrow, but we're trying to find that solution so all parties are happy. You know, we've obviously a restaurant, we've got to cook food, and like I said, we've got I was told it was the #1 system which was on the market when we got it, and we've subsequently upgraded it more, and the man hours we put into trying to manage it as well. Like, you know, the management have now got apps on their phones which is telling our filter systems all the time to make sure they never go below levels. So it's very much on our radar. So yeah, and if, like I said, we're always looking if there is improvements and, you know, new equipment's coming out, we'll always look at that.
And how often, when you arrived, or obviously you're a new business in that location, did you ever have any consultations with the local residents?
Sorry, just in general consultation?
Yes, just general consultation, yes.
So
just have, you know, a courteous one.
Yeah, so we've had there is some communication between parties. I wasn't around at the first meeting last year. I think Steve had taken one, but yes, I think in our submissions, I think we've had four meetings this year. Obviously, being relatable to things, but we have been in dialogue. Again, I believe the neighbours are in constant dialogue as well with Martins, who is the estate that we are our landlord essentially, and we speak with Martins weekly, who relay a lot of the, you know, concerns and things. So, you know, we are there as well. So we're getting updated from them as well, because I believe they've got a constant line into them as well. So I do think there has been dialogue, and we're always, you know, we've got each other's emails, so we're certainly not avoiding or ignoring neighbours.
And my final question, Chair, if I may. How often are you at the premises? Because you're the owner and you have other businesses. How often are you at that venue?
On myself?
Yes.
Myself, I am there most days of the week. A lot of them are during the daytime hours, so I will be 10 till 6. I have a 5-year-old daughter. I'm a single father, so I'm not always there in the evenings, but I'm not DPS. But I'm there virtually every day. I do a lot of my work for my other businesses based there as well, so I set up in the office there.
Okay. Thank you very much.
And Councillor Wade, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Did you ever apply for planning permission to change the frontage of your business, i.e. the frontage used to be on Kings Road, and now because of its orientation it actually opens up Walpole Street, and so did you apply, did you consult with residents over the change of the frontage?
Good morning, first of all. None of the planning was done by us. We're merely the tenant. We came in, I think Martins, the landlord, had already seeked planning by the time they went to market through, I think, Savills. We were applying to a premises with fully planned and everything like this. So we weren't involved in any of that. That was predated our business or even my involvement in any way. So that was for Martins, not for Ixchel.
Because the reason why I ask is it actually changes, the orientation changes from people going out on the King's Road, which will be a clear pathway, and then one where you have the change in orientation of the door, which in effect angles people down Walpole Road, which, I mean, the problem is that that's a very quiet road. So when I read your dispersal policy, I didn't see that there was an active plan to prevent people actually discharging down that road. So I'd be interested to hear what you have to say about that. And again, with the extraction, and I read that you couldn't do a high level of extraction, but where are your vents facing? Are they facing Walpole Road, or are they facing King's Road?
On your first point, we will amend the dispersal policy to state more clearly, and I apologise on that, but we are very much, Walpole Street is the priority, and our SIA member and our reception team all know, no one goes down Walpole Street, and they don't. Regarding the extraction, again, this predates ourselves. We've come into a venue where it is, and it is set in the car park below, which comes through ventilation, which does go onto Walpole Street. But again, that was not my decision. I've merely taken a lease on a site which has that in place.
I think we have to agree that different. I realise that it may not be a statutory nuisance as far as the council is concerned, but you're operating from 7 o'clock in the morning and proposing to go through to quite late. I don't know when your terminal hour for your cooking will be, but actually the problem is it is cumulative. During the day, there is some footfall which causes aroma dispersal. At night, that road is really quiet, so you're not going to have that flow that disperses the smell. So I would be interested to see, I understand that you've upgraded. I would like to see a schedule of the maintenance, whether or not you have filters that need to be changed within the kitchen, or whether it's part of the essential plant. And also I'd like to see the hours that it's being used, because they do, however good they are, they can create noise. It's quite a narrow street, and therefore you can get that tunnelling effect. With even the lowest, it becomes almost a permanent. So could we have some more detail about that?
I can absolutely supply you with all that detail. I think we gave you a summary of everything, but if you want individual reports on the stuff, that absolutely. Regarding the sound the machines get, I wasn't aware that was an issue. No one's commented on that to us before, so I didn't realise the sound was. But as regards the filter maintenance and everything like this, yes, we've got all that on record. That's a given, so I can certainly get that for you.
What are your hours at the moment of operating the extraction aircon system?
It's on the machine.
Sorry?
The cooking, the machine is always on, so the machine is on permanently. But again, I didn't realise there was actually a sound complaint on the machine. I can't hear it on the street or even outside the room.
All right, because that is, you're on the ground floor of a residential building.
Yes.
And therefore, I think that you do need to investigate actually the times that you're on. Also see whether or not there's any other way that you can vent out of your kitchen that doesn't go into the car park and therefore go through into the building. Is there any way that you could look at that?
I would have to speak to the landlords because it's, in fairness, their plant. It's not mine. We've inherited it in the lease, so it's theirs. So I'd have to speak to the landlords to come back to you with an answer on that. If it's feasible and it would help on the issue, then yes, we would certainly look at it.
Right, because I think certain cuisines give off certain aromas, and so, you know, you may have textbook equipment, but actually it can, especially it's quite spicy, because you presumably use quite a lot of chilies.
Can I just jump in at this stage and say this, that if one looks at what your officers are actually saying, they're not looking at it from the point of view of, is this a statutory nuisance? They're not approaching it from that point of view. There's a condition on the licence, it's condition 18 on page 14, which says this, that no smells generated from the cooking processes at the premises shall give rise to nuisance. It's not statutory nuisance. Shall give rise to nuisance to occupiers of neighbouring properties. And then, if you look at what the officers are actually saying...
Sorry, Mr. Rankin.
If you look at what the officers are actually saying, that's on page 73. And these are the times that they visit. There was one complaint when the premises weren't even trading. If you look at page 73, the first item there is the 27th of February 2024. The officer advised that on the 27th of February that the premises have a new extract system with odour control measures. However, it discharges us at ground level. Any remaining odours might not dilute, disperse as effectively as high-level discharge. And then, importantly, officers do not believe the odours could impact someone in their homes. It's only when walking past, when the officers visited, they experienced little odour. And then the 28th of November 2023, officers visited. He or she witnessed a low-level smell that was not perceptible on the opposite side of the road. And that's the same for every visit. So I wouldn't want us to get bogged down with officers looking at it from a statutory nuisance point of view. They're not. They're looking at it from a licensing point of view. Is this a nuisance? And in our view, it's not.
I think we have to acknowledge that the majority of the objectors commented about the smell. It did not matter whether they lived opposite or above. The fact is that the aromas of the cooking were perceptible outside the building. So I think if we just start from that point, what time do you turn your extraction aircon off?
Sorry, can I just interject here? I think we're beginning to, I think they've already advised that it's on permanently, and I think we're beginning to kind of go into the planning realms. I'm sure, I would imagine there's a planning commission.
I think the two things, one about the orientation of the venue, actually we have to work out how people are prevented going down Walpole Road. They may be parking down there. So you do have noise which is accumulative in impact. If it's just kind of one-offs, people can actually deal with it. But if it actually impacts on people's lives, that's just, if we can find ways forward that kind of deals with these two problems, I think that it would help residents, because everybody wants business to work. But we just need to find a happy balance. I mean, the other question I wanted to ask is, you say you have 4 residents' association meetings per year. How do you advertise them?
Thank you. Via email. And the last one, we put the notice up as well for it. I'm aware we missed that on one of them, sorry.
With the building above you, do you think it might be a good idea to inform the residents, because you're sharing a building with them, And also, I think that you will have each block, the blocks will be able to have a notice board. I think you've got to, emails are fine, but not everybody's on email. Not everybody reads their email. Not everybody can make the times, and so therefore it might be useful, you know, as a way forward to improve your method of advertising.
Yeah, we'll happily look at that. I'm more than happy to open up. We were just following our licence condition with the residents' associations. We were asked to email, so we were just doing it in accordance with that. But if we want to, if the council think it's a better idea to open up further, then we're more willing. We are in dialogue with a lot of our residents anyway. A lot of the locals do frequent our venue, so we do have relationships. But yes, notice boards and things like this, absolutely, we'll happily look at that.
Final question, are the Residents Association meetings in person or are they Zoom or Teams?
Zoom or Teams.
Yes, go ahead. Another question.
Mr. Crothers, I just have two more questions. The consultation with the RAs, what was the response? How well were they attended?
I believe the first couple were relatively well attended. I think we did one with just Mr. Huntley attended, and then the last one, no one attended at all.
Right, okay, so you've had 4, and just a rough idea of numbers?
0 the last one, 1 the time before that, and I think 3 the time before that. And I must admit, I don't want to speculate on the very first one. I wasn't actually on that call. That was some other members of the team at that time.
Right.
But I think it was actually I won't comment. I don't know.
Right. Okay. So but no individual resident attended at all. You just invited the RAs.
The RAs, yes, and I believe that it was put out, and one of them especially, I think there was I was on an email trail, and there was lots of residents' emails on it, and I think that's one that Mr. Huntley attended, but no one else.
Right. Now I can speak from experience. Consultation is a difficult job.
Yeah.
So, and my final question. Sorry, one more. Sorry, Chair. On the SIAs, would you object? I mean, to having 2 SIA guards? I know it's an expense, but you know, I do understand it's a struggling business. I mean, you know, hospitality, I take it all on, but we have to think of the residents as well.
I think, again, just you touched upon the point there. I think, sorry, one of the reasons I'm sitting here right now is because the business is not where we would like it to be, and we're very mindful of costs, and there's only so much you can cost. You also need to get the revenue up as well, and we've noticeably seen in London the last 6-7 months that the spend per head is gone down, and you know, I'm speaking to many restaurant owners in this borough and Mayfair as well, so we're aware of that. So my only issue with that is just the, as you say, the financial commitment, because it is, they're not cheap, these companies. So again, it's one of those ones I wouldn't want to offer up straight away, because this is a financial decision. We're trying to make sure that we can keep people in work. So if
you caveat it with you know, a certain time frame,
something like that, or numbers of guests in it. For example, if we were aware that we had a lot of people, that you know, if we had over 50 or 60, something like that, we could work on it. I'm happy to always, you know, work and see if we can come to a compromise, but just on a risk assessment basis.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. And the final point I was going to say was that, Mr. Rankin, you said on your page, on your submission on page 7, or 9 rather, point 3 about the hours, and you said that maybe reduce the smokers from 15 to 10. This is more of an observation. You think, you know, that would be, they don't make too much noise. And I know from my own children, you know, a crowd of 5 can make enough noise. It depends what age group they are. So, you know, so it's and even having 10 people outside, you know, in a residential street, I think it's quite a lot. So if you were to ask for a slight reduction in numbers on that, how would you feel about that?
Yes.
It's a tricky one, I understand.
It's terribly difficult, because the reality is that if you and I stood outside the restaurant a Thursday evening at, say, 11:30, you wouldn't see a large crowd of smokers out there. The point about giving ourselves more smokers than we need is that it allows us a bit of wriggle room. If you cut it down to 5, and then one evening there are 6 smokers out there, or 7 smokers out there, I imagine that Mr. Huntley and the other residents are going to be there with a clipboard noting that down, and we wouldn't want to fall foul of a condition just by virtue of the fact that we were over it. So what I can say is we will happily cut it back to 10. The reality is that it will be fewer than 10, but please don't impose that as a condition. Don't say you can only have 5 smokers. What's important about a hearing like this is that we all understand exactly where we stand. We understand precisely what the concerns of the residents are, and we seek through you to address those. So we are acutely mindful of the fact that residents do not want to be disturbed, and we will do everything in our power to ensure that. But to restrict us to five smokers is not really the nub of the problem. It could be 5 of your children outside making a great deal of noise. Or it could be 5 of my children making even more noise.
Okay, thank you, that's very kind, thank you.
Okay, I actually have a couple more questions. One, in your sort of submission, you say you're going to have a DJ. That, to me, means more nightclub than restaurant. So can you explain a little bit more? How does that work? What does that mean?
There are, I think, 20 restaurants, we can name them, in central London that have a DJ. We've identified the Bluebird, for example, has a DJ. Ivy Asia has a DJ. It doesn't mean that the premises magically become a nightclub. For my own part, I find it something of an interference if I'm dining and there's somebody there with a DJ deck. But it's at background level. There's no dance floor. People don't dance. And one of the conditions that has been proposed, and it's a sensible one if I may say so, is that the premises will not operate as a nightclub, discotheque or similar venue. Now I know when speaking to the residents this morning, they said, well, what does that mean? And the answer to that is one applies common sense. The presence of a disc jockey, not playing requests or anything like that, but playing a series of tracks at background level doesn't turn the premises into a nightclub. But if, on the other hand, the premises have a dance floor, have laser lights, and people come there to drink rather than to eat, then that, as a common sense approach, would turn the premises into a nightclub stroke discotheque, as opposed to what it is at the moment with a man just playing a soundtrack.
Okay, so currently, what are your busiest days, and do you expect to have a DJ just on the busiest days or every day?
So our busiest days of the week are Thursday, Friday and Saturday. We only have DJs on those nights. We, again, budget permitting, we would have it on the other nights of the week if we could. Instead, we've got curated soundtracks along with it. Again, as Mr. Rankin, alluded to, we took some inspiration off a lot of the Mayfair restaurants and that kind of dining scene, which do have, music curated while you're eating. Virtually most restaurants in that part of town now have this style of eating. So it's not unique to us. We certainly aren't a nightclub, but it's trying to give that extra sense of touch, smell, hearing, all these types of things. It's meant to be an experience when you come to dine with us.
I just have a query about the food. Right, so you have the tables where people have a full meal, but actually is there a limit, or can people just order, for example, a small dish, not a full meal. Can you possibly expand on if people come, is there a minimum of food that they have to eat?
It's substantial.
And is there bar food as well?
So we don't have bar food. It's a full dining menu. Even if you sit at the bar, it's substantial food. And no, if someone just came in and they wanted to order a side plate, that wouldn't be allowed. To be honest with you, most evenings anyway, we are solely reservation driven. We have very few walk-ins. It's all pre-booked, and and we are very much a restaurant. There's no walk-in. There's no bar food. It's dining, and it's we have a sharing concept for style food, so it's not a starter, main, and dessert. We have more of a plates across the table, but substantial plates.
Your hours are, I think, 8, isn't it 8 in the morning? It says 7 until 24. So I just wondered how food is provided over the course of the day. So at 7 o'clock in the morning, or 8, whenever, presumably 7 o'clock was you started preparing food.
We trade lunch and dinners only. We don't do breakfast. It's part of our license, our lease, agreement with Martins. We have to be open 7 days a week for these hours. A lot of restaurants in the area have that. Landlords want the King's Road to be open, essentially. But actually our cooking hours, probably some prep is going on from 9 in the morning for lunch, and then some in the afternoon. But our trading hours currently are just lunches and dinners, and they're quite consistent all week. Both evenings a lot more reservation driven. Pretty much the only way you come to us is through reservations, whereas lunch we do get walk-in shoppers.
Just a thought. You say, what is your interpretation of a substantial meal?
The House of Lords once wrestled with that conundrum, and I love the idea of the Lordship sitting down and deciding what was or what wasn't a substantial table meal. But they said that if justices, on a finding of fact, found that a sausage on a stick and a pickled gherkin was a substantial table meal, then they wouldn't interfere with that. It's a question of fact in each case.
I would like to think that a restaurant of your calibre would actually prefer not to be serving a sausage on a stick. But it still comes back down to the point that you could come and you could have relatively small food provision and actually be entitled, therefore, to drink at the table and then drink at the bar. Just a thought as to what your interpretation is of a substantial meal.
Arguably, someone probably could. We would obviously bring that up with them. Obviously, our spend per head would not allow that. As I said, it's diners. We don't. Again, I'm sure the letter of the law would be they could get away with ordering one small dish potentially, but I've never seen it happen to date. It's not common practice, and we would have an issue with the customer should they try that. But it doesn't happen. It's never happened to date.
As you can see, I'm being instructed as well. We would like to know what the spend per head is, therefore.
Varies obviously between lunch and dinner. I think dinner is about £60. It's gone down a bit, as I said. We've noticed across the industry that its spend per head has gone down from probably about 75, and lunch is probably about £30 per head.
Thank you.
You don't do any discounted alcohol. There's no happy hour.
No.
There's no 2-for-1 specials. The only offer that you have is on food, where you have a bottomless taco lunch on Tuesdays.
That is correct. We've never discounted alcohol since we've opened. The only introduction we've recently done just to bolster Tuesdays lunch and early dinner trade is, as James has alluded to, is a bottomless tacos. So you can eat as many tacos in 1 hour as you can, should you be inclined.
Okay, thank you. I've got just a couple more questions, then we hopefully will move on. So I just want to know a bit more about your tens. Obviously, you've had quite a lot, 23 to be precise. Have they all been advertised and for special occasions, or are you just trying to see how it runs as an extended business hour?
A bit of both. We have had some special dates where we put it on. Most recently, if I'm honest with you, we've realised the revenue we can drive by having open the Saturdays. As you said, there's some that aren't on record. We've recently started using our tens up because we're aware that we can get that extra trade. And initially, the mindset was, let's see if we can trade to these hours. Let's see if we are a responsible operator. And we felt when we came to the pre-app, when we spoke, that there was no complaints on any of these dates. That we felt okay. We've shown that we have been respectful and we can manage this extra hour and a half of eating and drinking.
Thank you. And just one other thing, going back to the kitchen, what time does the last meal, what time does the kitchen close?
So I think I'm correct on this, by the way. I will double check after this, but I think they normally, about 11 o'clock is desserts only. So up to about 10:30, there's no mains being cooked because we just won't turn it around. So it's normally about 10:30, 10:45 at the very latest. You can get a mains order, and then there might be some desserts, cold dishes coming out after that time.
And if you had your extension, when would the last?
An extra hour, essentially. I'll have to check with the kitchen exactly, but the idea is we would get that extra seating, and some of these people that are coming a bit later, when we go, well, actually you'll have to vacate by 12. Now you can actually think, and it will make a difference because there's plenty of restaurants they can go to where they can dine a bit later, and a lot of people in the area and a lot of guests coming to the area do like to eat a bit later, we're finding in these days.
Okay, so just for clarification, what is the last time for order currently, and what would it be if when you've done your tens? What is the last time for final orders?
I believe, and I apologise, I haven't got the exact answer. I believe at the moment it's 10:30 for like a hot dish. Things like ice cream are very easy for the kitchen to do after that, and I believe it would be probably circa about an hour later than that if we would stay open later. Again, the orders go in, it takes time to prepare them, but do you know what I mean? It's not, when you order at 10:30, it doesn't mean the food goes out exactly at 10:30. It's just, that's the kitchen's time to prepare and get it, and that's kind of what we work to for a midnight. So I would imagine, I need to check with the kitchen team, it would mirror the same time scope, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Now, any questions from our legal officer?
Thank you. Just a few questions. In terms of the music, you haven't got regulated entertainment, and obviously you're saying that your DJ will be incidental background music. Yes. Are you intending on applying for regulated entertainment down the line?
No.
Okay. Thank you. Smoking area, it doesn't say where the designated smoking area is. I presume it's on the King's Road. Is that where the smoking is?
Yes, King's Road.
Thank you. In terms of the tens that you've carried out, the 23 tens, which nights would you say were your busiest under the tens?
All of them have been busy at different times, but probably the Saturday would be, as with all businesses in hospitality, Saturday night's always the strongest, but all of them have been busy.
Thank you. Obviously you're operating until midnight at the moment, or sorry, your closing is at midnight. I think you've got alcohol till 11:30 and late night refreshment until midnight, with closing at midnight. Obviously the council has a midnight policy. Can you just, in a nutshell, explain why you think that the midnight policy shouldn't apply here and you should get your extension till 1 o'clock?
it's one of those ones where one is able to present an application to you as one where there is, we would say, an obvious exception to policy. And we say it for this reason, that on 23 occasions we have applied for and been granted, without any complaint, temporary events notices to run these premises for exactly these hours. And there has not been one single noise complaint made to the council in respect of that. And we say that that should weigh very heavily in our favour when you're weighing that in the balance and deciding whether you should grant this as an exception to your policy.
Thank you. Just for the record, perhaps Mr. Williams, can you, the main pack doesn't list all of the dates of the 10s. Are you able to, not necessarily now, but at some point, just tell us the extra dates, just so that we can document it in the full decision? Obviously 10s, it's only the police and environmental health that can object, and I don't believe there's like an advertisement requirement, so perhaps later on when the objectors have their say, they can confirm whether there were any issues on the dates of the 10s and the ones that Mr. Williams is going to mention. The summer, you didn't get tables and chairs on the Kings Road frontage, that was refused, but you did have a summertime terrace in one of the parking bays along Walpole Street, which has obviously been removed now. I presume you may or may not apply for one for next year. If you're serving alcohol in the summertime terrace, you will need to have off sales, presumably, because you don't fall within the timings of the Business and Planning Act. Will you be applying for off sales for the terrace?
We would need to do that. And also, Mr. Williams pointed out helpfully, just before the meeting started, that condition 11, condition 12 would have to be amended.
To cover that?
To cover that, yeah.
Just for the summertime terrace, or because you probably wouldn't be, you haven't got off sales at the moment for the premises, so obviously at that point in time when you apply for off sales, you'll need to consider how to word condition 12, whether it should buy on the premises and the summertime terrace or just the terrace.
Exactly, and I was thinking something along these lines, that save for any areas licensed under the Business and Planning Act 2020, something along those lines.
Yeah, I mean obviously that's not for today, but
no,
yes, in the future. Okay, yeah. Sorry, Mr. Williams, did you want to say something?
Yeah, it should just include perhaps that no takeaway food or hot drinks will be provided.
Isn't there already a condition about no takeaways, I think?
It is. It's condition 12.
Okay, it says there should be no sales of hot food or hot drink for consumption off the premises. That would, if they have a summertime terrace, it would prevent anyone from actually eating on the terrace. So they might wish to amend
that would need to be tweaked, wouldn't it? Yeah, I mean obviously that's for later. Okay. Okay, so we've discussed regulated entertainment, we've discussed how busy you were during your 10s, we've discussed the midnight policy. One, it's not really a licensing question, how long is your lease for, just out of interest?
20-year lease.
20 years?
20 years.
20 years. And one other question, what other similar type premises are in the area, or are you like the main big restaurant in the area? If you could just kind of explain the locality to me, please.
I like to think we're the main big restaurant in the area, but there's a lot of the Ivy, for example, and Ivy Asia. Again, a couple of big restaurants. Bluebird is another example. These are all big restaurants.
I think I'm just thinking kind of along the King's Road in kind of nearest to you. I'm just trying to gauge what kind of shops or restaurants are kind of there. Obviously there's the map in the pack, but I thought I'd just ask you the question.
Yeah, in very close proximity, I'm not sure, to be honest with you, but all three of those are on the King's Road obviously, but they're slightly further down the King's Road.
Thank you. Now, any questions from the objectors?
Thank you for the opportunity. I think we prefer to save our time for submissions and then questions afterwards, if that's okay with the panel.
Okay. All right. Now for the objectors' case, Ms Stevens, Mr Manuel, Mr Harmstone, Mr Huntley and Ms Brow-Frankly. Please, can you present your submission? You have also 10 minutes to do so.
If it pleases the committee, we'd like to do it in this way. Mrs Stephen from Whitelands House will address the issue of smells. I, in my capacity both as a resident but also representing a series of resident associations known as the Resident Interest Group, who have all got concerns about this, will speak to general issues. And then Mr Harmston, on my right, will deal with issues of crime, and then obviously questions can follow. Will that be okay?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's
Go ahead.
Mrs Stephen.
Thank you.
Thank you. This will take 8 minutes. I'm Virginia Stephen. I'm chair of Whitelands House Residents Association, and I represent 114 flats in the building. Whitelands House is situated above Ixchel Restaurant and fronts Walpole Street, the King's Road and Cheltenham Terrace. This is a residential area despite its proximity to the King's Road. The residents of Whitelands House have been directly affected by the cooking smells from Ixchel since it opened. It is not possible to sit in the garden abutting Walpole Street or have flat windows open without being assailed by cooking odours. This is because the extraction facilities for cooking smells from Ixchel's kitchen are inadequate. The smells emanate from grills placed about 3 feet from pavement level in Walpole Street, at eye level with buggies and wheelchairs and dogs. These grills were designed to facilitate the flow of air into the underground car park, part of which now comprises Ixchel's kitchen. The grills, therefore, were never designed for the purpose to which they are now put. Residents have complained about the impact of cooking smells. Council states that on their visits to the premises, the officers did not find that odours from the restaurant would impact on residents in their homes. As the officers did not go inside the residents' homes, how could they tell what the impact of the smells was? It is one thing to be able to walk away from an obnoxious smell, as the officers could, but quite another when, as a resident, you are forced to live with it. Before the amendments to the use classes regulations in 2022, planning permission would have been required for a change of use from retail premises to that of a restaurant. One of the requirements would presumably have been for the installation of proper and effective extraction facilities for cooking smells. If that were not possible, the application would probably have been refused. In Westminster, for example, the council would allow only full-height extraction, i.e. above the roofline, or an acceptable recirculation system where there is no external discharge of kitchen fumes and where all cooking operations are by electricity. DEFRA has issued detailed guidance on control of odour and noise from commercial kitchen exhaust systems. This divides the risk assessment for odours into 4 parts: dispersion, proximity to receptors, i.e. those likely to be affected, size of kitchen and type of cooking operation. The poorest dispersion is via low-level discharge, e.g. into a courtyard. This is what we have from Ixchel, 3 feet from the ground, abutting the pavement in Walpole Street. The best dispersion is discharging 1 metre above roof level of a certain height of building, This best option is not possible for Ixchel because of the height of Whitelands House to which it is attached. The risk rating for size of kitchen is large, medium and small. Ixchel with more than 100 covers comes into the large category. The risk rating for cooking type and grease loading relates to the type of cooking method and the type of food being prepared. If there is a high level of fried food, this type of cooking comes into the very high category. DEFRA offers guidance on odour control methods. There is a distinction between odour removal and emissions discharge. Ixchel is currently open from 7 a.m. to midnight, and thus cooking can take place during the whole of that time, every day of the week. Ixchel now wish to extend those hours to 1:30 a.m. on Thursday, Friday and Saturday to increase the number of covers per evening. In order to acclimatise the local residents to the possibility of extended opening hours in the future, Ixchel has applied for a number of tens over the past year and has said that no complaints have been received. This is unsurprising, as many of those tens, we believe, were not implemented. The point has been made that individual residents do not write into the council with their complaints, but this is not necessary. Almost every street in Chelsea has its own residents' association with the umbrella Residents' Interest Group, chaired by Graham Huntley. All residents are busy and many are elderly, and they do not have the time or the expertise to negotiate the council's website. That is why residents' associations exist. Extended hours for Ixchel means increased cooking smells, more noise late at night, a possible increase in crime and rubbish. Ixchel started life as a daytime and evening restaurant and is now wishing to extend into nighttime activity. Other restaurants in the area close at midnight. There is no reason we would have thought for Ixchel to have special treatment, particularly as this increases its nuisance value. The Environmental Protection Act 1990 provides for complaints about statutory nuisance such as unwelcome or hazardous smells escaping from various premises. When assessing the complaints, certain factors have to be taken into account, such as the general character of the area and the extent to which the nuisance is interfering with the quality of life for nearby residents. The residents of Whitelands House are indeed adversely affected by the cooking smells from Ixchel, which affect the enjoyment of their property. We request, therefore, that the licensing committee rejects the application for extending licensing hours by Ixchel for these reasons. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead. Next one.
I'm so sorry, I was waiting for any questions that might exist. Thank you. The fundamental objection of the residents and the associations is that this is not an appropriate extension of midnight policy, which is important. It is because of three things in particular. One, as I will explain, what we're doing here today is part of a long-standing programme of application creep. Second, it is going to further damage particularly the nighttime amenity of the residents. And thirdly, I'm afraid to say, it's coming from a management group that, unlike other applications that we see, has lost the trust of the residents, in fact never really gained it in the first place. And we say, as demonstrated in ways I'll explain in a moment, that it has not complied with the assurances it has given to this group of residents, or indeed this committee, or indeed the conditions that were imposed on it. Now, the planning history has been mentioned. It's not strictly relevant here today, but what is relevant on the point about management is that we were informed that when those applications were made, and Councillor Wade asked about them, there were 3 of them in early 2022, finishing in August 22 for the various things we talked about today in terms of fans and extractors and extra space and so on. They were being sought alongside the management of Ixchel having already secured the successful tender for these premises. And we know this because when we spoke in this very chamber with Mr. Manticolau and his solicitors, they were aware of the content of those applications. And the point about them, which is relevant today, is that they were replete, and I do mean that word advisedly, with many references to change of shop, retail, shopfront. The word restaurant and nighttime didn't appear even once in any of the applications. And we say that those applications with the language I've referred to, which were supported by statements of truth, are important, and we reject the suggestion in the submissions from the applicant that these are not seriously questionable things that bear upon the attitude that this committee should have towards the management. There was considerable objection from residents before this committee when the licence came up in March of 23. The committee itself was concerned about extending a licence to 11:30 p.m. That's clearly recorded in the minutes. And to address that concern, the applicant's then management and proposed designated person informed the committee that the restaurant was and would forever remain singularly and exclusively focused on a high-end eating experience, which in all fairness is not being resolved from today, with alcohol being entirely subsidiary to that. And further, if the committee went as far as overcoming our objections and granting the licence to 11:30 p.m, Mr. Manticolau, taking instructions and then talking to his solicitor, informed this committee that that was all that the operation would need and they would not come back and ask for more. There would be no more creep. Now, that doesn't, again, find any objection today. What we're being told is that actually it doesn't matter anymore because there's been some dramatic change in the economic market for which there hasn't been any real evidence put before this committee to justify that conclusion being accepted. Then the creep starts. Mr. Manticolau leaves, in come the tables and chairs applications, which have already been spoken about. As regards the TENS, I'm sorry to say that there is a significant dispute of fact between the applicant and the residents over this. We strongly disagree that they were all used. Many residents went to see what was happening when these TENS were promoted, and in fact we could see for our own eyes that the restaurant was not open at 1 a.m. when the TENS were meant to be going on. That's not surprising. In one of the meetings to which I'll refer, Mr. Manticalau's replacement, not long afterwards, Mr. Virani, the DP, the designated person, told us in one of the meetings that Mr. Carruthers says he wasn't at, that the reason was that they were asking for TENS in order to market the site to private parties and the like, not that they would use them all. That was a word of assurance and comfort being given to us. We suggest that this committee needs real evidence of all of those events having taken place before it can draw the conclusion that you're being invited to draw by the applicant today. Even now, all Ixchel is really saying is that the licence is there to enable a further turn on tables. That was what we were hearing earlier on. But what it is actually openly advertising, and this is in the papers for the committee to see on its own Instagram account, I think it is that its many followers should, and I now quote from its own publicity, join us downstairs at Ixchel, where our DJs play in our tequila bar every Thursday to Saturday until late. Now, the committee does not need, I suggest, evidence to understand what kind of patron will be attracted to that language. It doesn't suggest anything about substantial meals. You can have a drink alongside it. This is a tequila bar, which we all know, thankfully, don't all frequent too often. However, we are told that there are other restaurants in the area who do something similar. That is a dispute of fact that also exists. As you will see from the establishments at Appendix J, none of them exist in terms of activity beyond midnight. We heard, for example, about Bluebird and Ivy Asia. They are no different. Ivy Asia does have a DJ, and it is background music, just the tables and chairs, but it complies with the midnight policy and closes and successfully operates. There's no evidence that this applicant needs to go to 1:30 to operate. What we say, therefore, is that there are serious concerns about what we can all rely on in terms of what the applicant is saying. The decision that the committee made in 23 was based on another assurance that was given that this would be a premium restaurant. I'm quoting from the notes of the committee's meeting, which will not be like the Tex-Mex type of restaurant. Alcohol will not be poured directly into patrons' mouths like some other licensed venue. That, we think, is somewhat in tension with inviting people to come to a tequila bar till the early hours of the morning. We're now told about dancing. There are residents here today who will tell you that they have seen dancing in this establishment going on downstairs. That's another dispute of fact that would need to be resolved. However, there are actually rather more obvious breaches of the assurances and conditions that were in play before today. You've heard about the meetings that were meant to take place. That arose out of condition 33. There were indeed 4 meetings, but they were not as you have heard this morning. The first took place in December 2023. What the applicant agreed by the condition to do, I'm now reading from condition 33, was to organise and to publicise by public display on its premises and minute meetings with residents and circulate the same to a specified group of resident associations who complained last time round. That just about got complied with without minutes in December 23. None of the subsequent meetings complied. Why? Because the next meeting that took place in April of this year was one that we, the residents, called in order to generate our complaints that had not been resolved about smells. Not that we were logging them on the council site, we went straight to the applicant to say, here are our concerns. There was no organisation by the applicant or any of the things I've referred to. The third meeting took place on the 4th of November this year. That is really a little rich, if I may say so, to be quoting from, because that was one that was called by the licensing enforcement officer of this council in order to address issues that we're talking about here today. None of the conditions that I've referred you to were complied with by the applicant. And the fourth meeting, about 10 days ago, was plainly a response to the failings to which I've just referred. And I'm afraid doesn't really qualify as evidence of what the applicant's attitude was to the conditions. It is interesting that you heard today, however, the applicant saying to you that this was just something in which they were voluntary participants. That is not what they agreed to accept by condition 33, where it was their job to organise, publicise, minute and notify. So that tells you that this applicant is not really ready for an exceptional departure from the midnight policy. As regards security, you will hear today that there is evidence from more than one resident that the security staff do not actually proactively do what they do. They largely stand around, and they've been photographed standing around on their phones, whilst people, more than 5 on occasions, are talking late at night in a quiet street and being heard down the road, when people want to be in their beds rather than getting out to wait for officers to arrive or call them up and go on their websites. This midnight policy is here for a reason, and it's to avoid this kind of thing happening with this establishment in this kind of locality. Any doubt about the management's attitude to these matters takes us back to the so-called altercation as it has been described in the applicant's submissions. It was, in fact, Mr. Manticlar's replacement, Mr. Varani, who is recorded on video for the committee to go and see if they wish, having left the premises with somebody who on their own account was intoxicated at the door. That is what happens late at night, walking out of Walpole Street, through the residential street, into Cheltenham Terrace nearby, where he then beckons an individual who's carrying out some burly security operation to commit an attack on the individual by knocking him out cold, so he's unconscious on the steps for about 4 minutes before the ambulance is then called. How do we know? A, because I witnessed it myself in the early hours, and B, because it's on video. And this is a designated person committing this act. It is not a mere altercation. This is the person that we look to, and the establishment that we look to avoid these things happening outside its own premises, let alone in other streets nearby. We're told that the answer to all of that is that Mr. Varani himself has also left. So now we're supposed to have confidence about a third manager in less than 18 months who we haven't met and hasn't generated any trust in the residents. This operation is not ripe and ready for departure from the midnight policy. One final point before we come on to others who wish to explain their own perceptions. The applicant has managed to generate a number of responses from residents in support. Most of them come from people outside of the area, different postal codes, not living nearby, and they seem to be writing in similar cut and paste, effusive and oleaginous terms in support. There are only 2 that purport to live anywhere near this operation in support. And one of them is a person called Mr. Eduardo, spelt rather unusually Minoli. He reports that he's in Cheltenham Terrace, SW3. I have been the chairman of that association for the last 10 years. Nobody in the terrace knows of or has ever heard of Mr. Minoli, nor is he known of in Whiteland's house. Somebody somewhere thought it appropriate to present such a person as a local resident.
You're at time. Sorry to interrupt, but you're at time.
Shame on them for doing so. I will finish simply by saying this. There is a person of that name, councillor, who is actually the chief executive of a nightclub group in London, and that takes us back to our central concern about where this is all going. This is Mr. Harmston on my right here, who is a resident in Walpole Street.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking to you today. Hello, I'm Andrew Harmstone. My wife and I have lived on Walpole Street since 1994, and we've raised two daughters there. I'd like to begin by responding to some of the points that were made by Mr. Carruthers and his attorney. First of all, the noise issue, or lack of complaints. I think we have to keep in mind that if there is noise late at night and you're woken up, it's quite a big deal to get out of bed, figure out how to make a complaint to the council, extend the whole period of disturbance, and then in the end, you know when you're doing it that it's useless, because by the time some help arrives, half an hour later, the culprit causing the crime, causing the noise, I should say in this case, has already moved on. The damage is already done by the noise. Sleep was disturbed for a person who had to get up early in the morning to get to work. Children are woken up, possibly even frightened by the noise if it's loud enough. And older children who are studying for important exams are disturbed and are not able to will have trouble getting back to work. I have to congratulate Mr. Carruthers on providing a restaurant that has excellent Mexican food. I've enjoyed it myself. However, I do have the feeling on listening to him and his attorney that we're in Spain. I'm surprised that so many people in London are looking for midnight dinners, as they would in Madrid. My suspicion is that most Londoners at 12 midnight are looking for post-dinner entertainment, and the DJ would support them. I think we have to consider, and I'm actually very grateful for Mr. Carruthers' candor with respect to the profitability being a problem at the restaurant. I propose that this application is a Hail Mary play, that's an American term, to bolster profitability by selling high margin alcohol at every opportunity possible, as opposed to actually providing, meeting a genuine demand for midnight dinners, regardless of the consequences of the neighborhood. So I suppose it's no surprise I object to the variation of the late night license to Ixchel to extend the terminal hour for sale of alcohol past 11:30. Granting this will likely lead to criminal activity outside the venue. I'm quite confident that within the venue this will be controlled. I'm trying to get my timer to make sure I don't go over time there. So that's very important. I'm concerned about crime outside, not inside the venue. There is no reasonable doubt, and I encourage the committee to look at studies themselves, that the availability of alcohol is strongly associated with nighttime entertainment violence. There is a study by the Journal of Investigative Psychology and Offender Profiling published in June of 23 that says NTE violence and alcohol-related violence are often considered synonymous as they co-occur so frequently. Moreover, and this is really important, this same study reports, and this is not, there are many others that have the same conclusion, research has shown that violence and disorder tends to cluster between 2300, that is 11 p.m., and 300 on Friday and Saturday nights. But these are precisely the times that the license application is asking to extend the sales of alcohol to. Now, what kind of violence or crime is associated with nighttime entertainment? Robbery is certainly one of them, but unfortunately it's not the only one. A study by the College of Police published in July of this year called Spotting the Behavioral Signs of Predatory Offending in Nighttime Economy states, in 2019, 42% of violent and serious sexual assaults in the city of Oxford were tied to the NTE. Now, we all know that Oxford is a notorious location for criminal activity and that London is a lot safer. However, one must think that these statistics probably do carry over to London as well. It goes on to say that predatory behavior exhibited by men towards women in public spaces is often dismissed as mere street harassment. This term, seemingly benign, can obscure the precursor signs of more sinister crimes, including sexual assault and rape. The study reported, we observed, remember this was a police study, we observed tryouts where suspects pretended to innocently loiter in or near NTEs, nighttime entertainment locations, standing alone often and not entering venues. They use dark doorways or bus stops as staging grounds, watching and following women, sometimes engaging them in conversation. This behavior typically targeted individuals perceived as vulnerable. Importantly, it is not just women who are vulnerable. Teenagers and young adults are also likely to attend and are shown to be, so teenagers and young adults are shown to be at the highest risk of victimization. So let's go to specifics about Walpole Street. These are kind of general results, right? We can say, okay, well, maybe they don't apply. Okay. Well, near Ixchel, there are many opportunities for loitering. I'm sorry to say that I see people loitering all the time along the street, and I suspect that my neighbors will have the same experience. Predators can innocently sit at the bus stop on Walpole Street. If you see somebody sitting there waiting, they say they're waiting for the bus at midnight or something like that. Possibly they are. You don't know that they're not. And look out for potentially vulnerable victims leaving Ixchel. Those who have drunk too much, leave alone, or decide to withdraw money from the Lloyd's ATM, which is only 4 stop fronts down the road. There are dark recessed doorways near Pret on Walpole Street where we see people there. I mean, again, I would encourage someone to go and take a look. And there's a poorly lit driveway to the parking lot between 3 to 7 Walpole Street where we do see people sitting, loitering, you know, basically probably 90% of the time legitimately, but there are opportunities for people who have ill intentions. They could simply be pretending to sleep rough. There are people, you know, unfortunate people who are sleeping rough in the neighborhood. So where does this leave us specifically? Extending the hours that alcohol is served at Ixchel from 11:30 to 3 will, without doubt, and this, the evidence is extremely strong on this, and I obviously you need to look at the evidence yourself, that NTE, nighttime establishment violence, is highly related to alcohol consumption. So why are we extending alcohol consumption to the very hours, 11:30 till 1, when this kind of violence is most prevalent in all the studies that I've seen? In effect, a successful late-night operation, I do wish Excel well because I do like your food, honestly. I've been there, it's good. But a successful late-night operation by Excel, serving alcohol late at night, in the very time that people are most vulnerable, will attract motivated criminals to the corner of the King's Road and Walpole Street. Now, I realize that it's been pointed out that there have been these TENs, these extended evenings occasionally. However, you have to remember that motivated criminals are not, aware necessarily. These things haven't been that well publicized that this is occurring. But if every single Friday and Saturday night they know that there will be vulnerable people there after midnight, the word will spread, and this is actually supported by the study. If an area becomes well known for providing good opportunities for crime, my time is up, I'm afraid. So all of this can be avoided simply by not extending the license to serve alcohol past 11:30. And I strongly urge the committee to reject this application.
Could I apologise to the panel? I should have also introduced Ms. Faquelli, who's also been registered to speak, so apologies for not having mentioned her before.
Hi. I live on Walpole Street, number 13, which is the right-hand side of Walpole Street going down, and I live on the second and third floor. My bedroom faces Walpole Street, and I tend to
Just
sleep
bear in mind you're on live stream, so don't give out too much personal information.
Sorry?
You're on live stream, so don't give out too much personal information.
That's fine. It's all right, but they can see it on the local registry anyway. So basically, I sleep with the window open, and it's, as the councillor said, it's a very quiet street. It's residential mainly. There's elderly people, there are families with children. Since the opening of Ixchel, which is I think a very good restaurant, my sons are in the restaurant business, so therefore I know, and they were offered this premises by Martins before Ixchel took over. So that's how we found out as residents that there was going to be a restaurant there. The restaurant actually advertises itself as a Mexican restaurant and a tequila bar. I've been there several times, either invited by friends or myself, going and experiencing and having a dinner with friends and families. The issue is, yes, if you go online to book a table, the latest booking is 7:30 online. If you try to phone, they will say it's full, which is acceptable. But what happens after 7:30 is another matter. So 7:30, as they said, 2 hours eating, fine, 9:30. After 9:30, if it's local residents, which is mainly not, because they advertise on Instagram to 43,000 people, the clientele is very young people, and there's mainly singles. They come there on a weekend to have a good time. So they drink, they eat, they drink, and they go downstairs. I've been there myself, as I said. I have danced myself, not, on a dance floor, but the music is quite loud, and it's a very in-fashion music that you can't stand still. You have to move because it's, a lively music. You can drink, yes. If you have finished your meal, you can have a drink. In most cases, they might say, would you like something to eat, but it's not actually enforced. So these are my own experiences, and I am concerned that if the license is granted, what will happen is, what happens now, the young generation obviously goes out to smoke, and they go back into the premises again, they drink a bit more, and then they come out again, they smoke, and then they go back in. And then you have this noise, constant noise going on. And when it comes near to closing time, everybody goes out and they're waiting for their Ubers, or they're walking down to their cars, and they talk loud because they were under the influence of alcohol. And that noise echoes on Walpole Street, which means that I cannot sleep with an open window, and not only me, most of our residents. And this is one consideration that the managers there, I often phone them. When Ivan was there, he gave his mobile. So the objections and the application for not going forward is not true that we didn't write to them. We actually did phone the managers, and often I would go, when Jason is there, go in and say, please, the smell and the noise, we can't take it. But we can't physically do that every night. After a long day, and especially at the weekends, after an intense day of work, you come, you go to bed, and the next thing is you're woken up with these noises. So I'm in favor not granting this license for later hours. Thank you.
Anyone else wish to contribute? That's it. Thank you. Okay, I have a couple of questions. Okay. So with the residents' meeting, the other side said that they've had 4, but you didn't turn up to the last one. Why is that, or is that not quite accurate? Can you give me more detail?
No, it's accurate to this extent, Chair. The meeting was called after this application was made, whilst objections were being lodged, and it was called for the 28th of the month just finished. We were already in the process that we are in here today, and I think I speak, I hope accurately, for the resident associations who've expressed a view that they no longer feel able to trust the operation of the management, and so the meetings have lost their utility. But that shouldn't derogate from the fact that that's something that has only happened because of this latest attempt to creep. The previous meetings, as I've already said, it was suggested that I was the only person who appeared at the meeting called by the licensing team here. That's because I was the only person invited. None of the resident associations here were invited. I don't blame the team for that. The team was not the one subject to the condition to notify all the specified resident associations in a specified manner and by publicity, none of which occurred. Hence, I found myself at a meeting discovering that my colleagues, for example, and all the residents I knew weren't there, and they weren't happy about that any more than I was.
Just could you elaborate? You said the licensing enforcement officer sort of invited you to the meeting on the 4th of November. Why did that occur, and what was included in that meeting?
I believe it was sponsored by 2 of the local councillors who had picked up a number of the reservations and complaints, and they were trying to see if there was a way of resolving these issues with the management. It wasn't a management-inspired organisation, nor was it the management complying with Condition 33. It was a licensing team trying to be proactive, which I frankly applaud.
Thank you. And obviously there was the isolated incident, which, because of the person involved, has been removed from the company. Does that not satisfy you at all? The fact that they actually sort of, something went wrong and they rectified it. How do you guys feel about that, just for that particular incident?
Well, there were these points. I mean, the gentleman concerned, Mr. Khalid Varani, was put to us as somebody with a great track record in the industry, just as you're being told now in relation to the latest incumbent in that position, a responsible licence holder, and we were given copious assurances to that effect by him and by the management of the operation. It's difficult to understand what kind of collection of people would have sponsored an individual with a mindset to leave his premises and go looking to commit a serious criminal assault on somebody else in a different street. So our concern is not that he's left, that's a factual matter that we accept. Our concern is that this establishment needs more time to justify, if it ever could justify, being the first establishment in a quiet residential area that has an exception to the midnight policy. If there was an exception, with the greatest respect, the incident or not, it wouldn't be this operation.
And you mentioned sort of building the trust earlier. So with the, I guess, new management, has there already been any attempt to build that trust or not?
Well, you've already raised the only attempt that's been made. The email that was sent to a few of us, to say it didn't actually comply with Condition 33. They've obviously got my name, and I was invited to this meeting. And I think 2 or 3 other associations were too, or it may have been all of them. But the point was that it was only in the last 2 weeks. It didn't have the appearance of a genuine attempt to comply with the licence, since we were nearly a year on from the last meeting that took place in compliance with Condition 33.
Thank you. And then just going back to the TENS, obviously you have some evidence or experience that maybe those TENS haven't occurred. How can you prove it? Because we need to understand that.
Absolutely. I think it would probably be for the applicant to prove it by generating the contracts and the evidence of people turning up at these events. What we say is that when they first were being applied for, and we discussed them at the meeting with Mr. Varani in April, we were told, as I've already said to the committee, that they were there to enable marketing to take place, and that we shouldn't be concerned they wouldn't all take place. Now, that is our clear recollection, and we haven't all inspired it just for today's purposes. But more importantly, many of us had the opportunity, knowing when these tenders were being applied for, to go and look and see for ourselves. And so there's direct evidence of the operation not being conducted on that evening.
Could it be because it was perhaps just not busy? Or is it, are you saying that they're actually using these tends to manipulate their evidence? I don't know. But could it be that they're just not busy, so no one's taking up the offer?
I can't make accusations of manipulation. What I can say is that the people who were applying for them and who were going to be conducting them apparently aren't here today. They have either been sacked or left. And that doesn't inspire confidence in the accuracy of the evidence you're being given. But when you walk past an establishment, as many of us did, to check out what was happening, the front door's shut, the lights are out. It may be happening all on the lower ground floor, but I don't think that's likely. None of us did. And we reported to ourselves in the usual communications that resident associations have, saying they're not using them. So there's a real mismatch here that needs to be investigated before we can treat this as reliable evidence of an operation that is ready and ripe for something that should never happen anyway, which is a breach of the midnight policy, which is there for very good reason, and which I would just say, if I may, whilst I'm finishing this, is a relevant consideration alongside the each application on its own merits approach. There is a policy there, and that is the context, and the policy is for very good reason. It protects us, the residents, from precisely this kind of thing, and it was relied on by this committee at the last hearing to refuse any further extensions of the licence beyond where we currently are.
Thank you. And just going to your experience at the restaurant, you say that when you said you were served drinks, had you previously had a meal there, or yes? So you were just a continuing customer drinking after a meal?
Because the music previously, when it first opened, was on the first floor, and I can understand they wanted more tables, so they moved it downstairs. But once it's downstairs, you can't see it from street view. And you can only tell unless you go into the premises. So, yes.
Thank you. Okay, just on the complaints thing, just for everyone, for the record, it is important that if you do have a complaint, that you do log it, because then obviously we get a fuller, rounded, more accurate picture. So for future reference, for everyone and anyone listening, please do log your complaints, even if it happens to be the next day. If you're too tired to do so at night, please do it the next day, because it really does impact the decision that the council can make. That's just a note to put out there. But councillors, Councillor Hudd, do you have any questions?
Good morning all, thank you for being here. I have to say I am incredibly shocked to surmise of your collective opinion of Mr. Carruthers and the Excel restaurant is that basically the management have literally been perfunctory in their consultations with you, and almost deceptive in what they plan to carry out at the restaurant, possibly not knowingly. You cite the consultation where you weren't notified enough. Mr. Manuel was the first one to invite it on the first consultation. The final consultation was done on the 28th of November. Mr. Varani's behaviour, who has now been fired from the company, or he has left. You also highlight the supporter, Mr. Eduardo. I have to say, I find that incredibly shocking. That you're alleging that this is a person who does not exist, who does not live in this block of flats. And you, Mr. Manuel, you've been a chair of the Residents' Association for a considerable time. Then, Mr. Hamstone, you say that in your experience, and I like the phrase Hail Mary stance, to bolster business, which you sympathize with, and I take that point, and that's exactly what I felt when Mr. Rankin mentioned that hospitality is tough. We need to revive businesses. I take that on board, but there's lots of crime and all that is, comes with it. And finally, Ms. Frachelli, you have attended the event, the venue. You enjoyed it. You said you have, danced. There's no specified dance floor, but the facility of dancing is there. And finally, the Instagram post. Again, and I think you make a very good observation, which I wasn't aware of, or maybe I misread it from the papers, that people of a certain generation, and I put myself in it, is we are shipped out by 9:30, and then it's, they invite another genre for the late night event, which I can understand as a business, it's difficult to make. So on all this, it is very depressing that they haven't engaged with you, or allegedly not engaged with you according to you. And the feeling I get is you all strongly do not want the licensing hours to be extended. What would give you, and the other points as well, which was very interesting for me, from Ms. Stephen, about the ventilation, that it has to be a certain height. That all makes sense. What we have discussed earlier, what would it be that would really give you any confidence of us granting anything? What would be your terms that would, I know you have lost any faith in Excel and its management. I appreciate that. But would there be anything? I'm just looking for something where, we hear you clearly, and I do know, as I say, I live in an environment, and as residents, you shouldn't have to put up with it. I do appreciate that very much. But at the same time, is there anything that would strike a fine balance between you and the Excel restaurant?
Councillor, thank you for the invitation. Shall I show you with it? We engaged in such a process in March of last year to discuss the application that was then being granted. We did actually trade conditions, and it was a very constructive discussion, but it all rested on the conclusion that we'd reached the parameters of operation. So, although there are doubtless things that can be tweaked in conditions, and there's a relationship that could potentially develop out of one that has not been harmonious, and I'm sorry to have to say that, but it just hasn't been. There have been meetings of the kind that I've described, and there have been lots of assurances, and I have to be fair to the applicant about this point. A lot of effort has apparently been made in relation to the extraction systems, but we've reached the end of that line is the very clear message that they and Martins have been telling us in terms. There is nothing more that can be done beyond changing the filters with the routine that is now being employed. So there's no mechanism for improving the smell problem. There is no mechanism for solving the human problem in all realism, because the reality is that people congregating outside and doing all the things you heard from Mr. Cruddy will keep on doing it, and there's no security that can organise the Ubers and the people walking in different directions, including down Walpole Street, and to have fights in Cheltenham Terrace anywhere. The fundamental problem here is a breach of a policy that has hitherto, to this day, been consistently applied for every other establishment in this area, which is the midnight policy. There is no other restaurant coming to you and saying, ooh, something has happened in the last 12 months. We've been running successfully till 11 or 11:30, but now we're in serious trouble and we've got to have something beyond that. The residents are, and I think this is fair to say, Councillor, they are petrified at the prospect of the beginning of a breach of that midnight policy right next to where they live and sleep. And I don't think I've overstated that. They are truly petrified by it. So that is the shock that we have, and it cannot be solved by granting a licence to do that very thing.
Thank you. Sorry, I just had one more question. Ms. Frachelli, my colleague, the chair, has already mentioned to you about the complaints. Because the other thing that came out was that there haven't been any complaints, well, not enough over the last year since they've opened. How frequently have you complained? Or collectively, how frequently have you complained? Complaints that haven't been logged.
Okay. We have quite a lot of elderly people, so I go to work quite early in the morning. Sometimes I see them on the street. They say, oh, last night there was smell, last night news. So I take them on board. I work full time. And although I phoned the council, and you can see from my emails, I do email at least once a week, and I have online complaints as well. Most of the time your website crashes, you get 404 error message. But my other neighbor, Mr. Rose, Dr. Rose, he lives next to me. I mean, we're all giving up, to be honest. How many times can you write? How many times can you phone? I go personally into the restaurant. I know the managers because I introduced myself specifically to say I live on Walpole Street and therefore please be considerate. And the previous managers would take it on board or have taken on board, but they can't do anything. They're running a restaurant. They can't come outside and say to people, please, can you come in or go out? Or this is the issue. As the councillor said, the door maybe should be moved to King's Road and taken off where it is, because then, you know, it's not going to make so much disturbance. It's mainly shopping, retail shops. But our street, that corner, unfortunately, it's like a corridor of noise, and it's very disturbing. So that's my answer to your question.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Rose. Dr. Rose, can I also ask you all collectively, would you, if they were to have the 2 SIA guards, would that not give you any confidence? And the disbursement about possibly, you know, everybody, all the punters stay inside the restaurant and they don't queue outside. I mean, to me, it could be done, you know, it could be staggered. So it doesn't have to be all at the same time.
Okay. I would say if you were going to a restaurant, which is not a cheap restaurant, it's quite expensive. By the way, they give discount on King's Road 10%. They said they don't discount, but there is a discount, which is very nice for the neighbors. Would you like to be told when you have to go out, when you have to go in to smoke a cigarette or come in? You probably will not.
No, I just meant when
yeah,
they
but
leave.
the two guys, let's say they have 2 guys, they don't have the authority to tell people what to do. If they're having a conversation with someone, with their girlfriend or boyfriend, if the guy says, can you please go in, they're not going to listen to it. I mean, why would they if they're smoking?
No, but that's not, the management would have to make sure that is actually strictly adhered to. It's not an optional condition.
I don't agree with it. I don't think it will happen. You know, I've been observing it every weekend, so that's my experience. But
to date, they've only had 1 SIA security guard. Nobody, no. So what I'm saying is, you know, 2 security guards.
Yeah, but the door is quite narrow. There's not much space for 2 guys. There's also...
Yeah, but they don't have to. They can be placed, you know, at a certain distance.
Maybe.
So they can control the crowd. It's crowd control, staggered, you know, staggered, staggered disbursement.
Yeah.
So, you know, I mean, because that's, and they can all stay inside the restaurant.
Yeah. Well, we have to discuss it.
Can I make a point about the dispersal policy? It was submitted, I think, yesterday, but it is, for all intents and purposes, the exact same dispersal policy dated March 23 that was before us last time. And much of the things that we're being told today were being promised at that time. The problems have continued. And that's unsurprising, since the policy, if one reads it, it's actually just a series of facts and statements about where you can find public transport, where you can walk, where you can do things. The only item of substance in it is a single promise that Ixchel's staff will politely request patrons loitering outside to continue their journey home. That was there before, hasn't solved the problems now. Why would we have confidence that at 1:30 in the morning it would get any better? I have to say, councillors, this is a square peg in a round hole issue. this is the wrong place for an exception to the policy that I referred to, but that's the submission we made.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wade.
I'll follow on about the dispersal policy. I want to talk about the fabric of the building and how you physically can report. So, on the dispersal policy, what would you like to see in the dispersal policy?
People dispersing at midnight and no later. That's what we want. It's what we've got at the moment, and what we've got at the moment needs to work better than it already does before we start to extend it. That's what we want, Councillor. I don't mean to be trite or silly, but it's the concern that is palpably in the minds of the residents. We can't
I think what I'm asking you for is detail. So we acknowledge the street is a quiet residential street. You've mentioned that people are sitting in doorways or waiting around. Would you want to see that the dispersal policy includes that the security guards walk down and in some places we've asked them to walk down, for example, Wolfell Street, and then come up through Cheltenham Terrace. As well, I'm asking you to see whether or not within the wording of a revised dispersal policy, what you would like to see, how the security guards would respond, and what they could ask people to move out of the doorways, but you could also they could also call the police if necessary if there are people loitering.
Yes.
So what would you like?
Okay, so it's been suggested already that maybe they if this was to be granted, they should be kept inside until their cars or whatever it is have arrived, or they're ready to leave as a group rather than one by one, and they shouldn't go back and forth smoking and whatever. I don't think that's an experience that patrons would like, and I can see it causing trouble and putting pressure on security guards. Yes, we could have secondly 2 security guards to bolster that service, but we do have some experience of this because there are security guards in some of the other establishments of which there's a proliferation of them now in Duke of York Square. And I'm afraid when security guards are walking down the street asking people to be quiet or not to slam car doors or to hush, that in itself creates noise, which I'm afraid people can hear if they're only a few feet away, as many of the residents here today are. So I don't know how easy it is to do that, but if there is to be, for the first time, activity of this kind going on till 1:30 a.m. in the area, then we would certainly want to try to rescue as much protection for the immunity of the residents as we could. And that would mean everything I've just said and probably more that we can't necessarily think about on the hoof.
For example, you could ask that Ubers should be designated to come on King's Road and should not use Walpole Road. I mean, that's one thing.
You can do that, but I'm sure I'm not the only one who knows very well that Uber drivers don't tend to either receive or follow those instructions. They do their own thing. I don't mean to be demeaning or in any way derogatory, but they come in all shapes and sizes, and I'm afraid the consistency of behaviour in that respect is desirable, but in practice not achievable.
Also, residents use Ubers as well. The issue is not only the dispersal, but also the attraction of crime to the area because there are vulnerable individuals. And I don't think you can outsource policing to security staff. It's not fair. They're not properly trained, and the police themselves have trouble managing this kind of crime.
But I'm just saying that there's certain things that you could incorporate in the dispersal policy, which, if not complied with, could give us the facility for enforcement. If you feel that you don't have the confidence of the management to execute an external security or control of that clientele afterwards, you have to ensure that you put in conditions or that the dispersal policy reflects your concerns in order that you have the instrument to be able to return.
Apologies, councillors. I'm just being asked to reinforce the point, we already have a policy that at least in general terms, constitutes another assurance from the management that they will try to encourage all these things to happen, or depending on what they are, not happen. But the evidence is, at least from over here, it hasn't worked. We're back to the same point. It's not the right time to now extend it. It needs to be bedded down, confidence needs to be built, evidence of important factual matters needs to be obtained and clarified for the committee, and then maybe there will come a time at which, if it's really necessary, we can come back to this application, but not today is our position.
I'll ask you one question. Do you feel the dispersal policy as presented by the applicant is sufficient at present?
Oh, definitely not.
All right, so...
And the reason for that is because it just contains that one point of substance, leaving aside the geographical map of the area and the description of it. There's only one point of substance in it, which is a promise that's already there to politely request patrons to leave and go to their place of abode without stopping along the way. That hasn't worked to date, is the point I've made already. So that current policy doesn't work. I totally agree with you that there are things one could build into it, and you've quite rightly raised some interesting ideas. Whether they could be achieved in practice is one thing, but not on a foundation of uncertainty, which is what we've got at the present time.
Therefore, would it be possible for you to negotiate with the applicants to actually come up with a dispersal policy incorporating the specifics that you would like to see? But I mean, I'm just saying, Uber cars, if one actually, because you're a one-way street, you're two-way, sorry. But it's quite narrow, I mean...
It is a narrow street. Look, there are residents with cars who park in most of the spaces that are available late at night because they're in their homes and beds, hopefully. The number of spaces that are available with other lorries unloading into the supermarkets and the fast food stores nearby, they come late at night, and then there's rubbish on the streets waiting to be collected. There's not a great amount of space for 3 or 4 Ubers to disperse this group. Having said that, look, you know, I'm a professional. It's my job to work on projects and see if one can come through them. And as I said before, in a rather more constructive way, last year we did spend quite a bit of time with the applicant's solicitor working through conditions, and we reached agreement on a number of things before the hearing itself. And if the question is, will we do it again this time, we certainly wouldn't say no, but the reservations I've outlined are still very much there.
All right, I'll get on to the second point. Is I realise the frustration of the website, but there is reported, RBKC reported, and people can do that at the time and after the event. So the question is, how many people complain to you perhaps do not have access to a smartphone or computer, and therefore how do you feel that you would want reporting to be achieved?
I'm going to ask one of the residents to amplify on that, but one thing I would say is that it would have been helpful if the numerous emails that I have seen being sent to the applicant operation setting out that kind of complaint had been collated and assembled for the purposes of, you know, openness and transparency. But does anyone of my colleagues want to comment on the... Yes, you do, Dr. Rose. There you are.
I mean, an app would be handy, but it needs to be easy to use. Yeah.
So, I mean, sorry.
Good morning. I gave up requesting attendance because of smell, and unlike what the applicant has said this morning, the response was, your officers, who were perfectly polite and very clear, that they could respond only to smell when those smells were discernible inside of a residence when the windows are closed. I walk Walpole Street 3 or 4 times per day, and they're my neighbours I see
holding their noses. I see others who tell me that what they do is they try not to breathe as they pass the vent. This is a huge nuisance. This is not, it's just not acceptable to say that people have spent a certain amount of money, because I am a developer of other projects, but I know that anything's fixable with available resource. And what's apparent in relation to the smell issue is that inadequate resource has been applied both in the planning and in the execution of this foul nuisance. Thank you.
If I may just add to that quickly, I have contacted council on a number of occasions, and I've unfortunately been unable to finalize the claim that's been submitted due to the fact that after you call, the officer wants to come into the house and observe exactly what you observed. And I've been told on numerous occasions that if the officer is not permitted to come into your premises and observe that situation, your claim disappears. It's not recorded, it's gone. So after a number of attempts going that route, what's the purpose? Furthermore, I think, Councillor, answering your question, we need to understand the footprint of Eggshell. There's only about 7 meters of glass frontage on Kings Road. The frontage side on Walpole Street is 26 meters. That's 80% of the shop front running down Walpole Street, okay? The entrance door is not north facing, it's not west, it's northwest. There's a natural spill onto Walpole Street because of the attraction of the quietness, the ample parking spaces, and so on. Did you know where the extractor fan is located on Walpole Street? It's at 40 meters from the corner of Kings Road, 14 meters beyond the edge of the building of Eggshell is where the fan is located. So this is pumping into our street, creating all kinds of havoc, whether intentionally or not. I understand for one reason or another we have issues of how we got to this point, but when remedies posed regarding cleaning the vents and the fans, they're talking at the kitchen. We're talking 40 meters from the kitchen. Who's cleaning the pipe? The smells are not getting better. They're building up on each other, getting worse, and hence more complaints are raising. I understand there's been significant expenditure on the fans, but there's a whole length of infrastructure that's probably not being dealt with and serviced accordingly. Thank you.
All right, we'll deal with the smells later, but in fact, if there were incidents of people in the street, you could actually photograph that and submit that as evidence. So I wanted to talk to the excellent Miss Stevens about you were very detailed. Who is the freeholder of the building which actually includes the commercial frontage?
You mean Whitelands House? Whitelands House is the freeholder of all the shops in the car park, including the restaurant.
All right.
The ground landlord.
So I think what I found really interesting about your submission was the fact that you're saying it's vented into a garage space,
yes,
and that the grills or whatever are for servicing for air ventilation within the garage.
Yes.
And
I went into the garage the other day to see if there were any grills still there that serviced the car park, and I couldn't see any because I assumed that they'd all been taken over by Ixchell's Kitchens. It's a problem, this smell, because smells are meant to go up well above the roof line and be dispersed. They're not meant to come out at ground level and sort of hit you in the eye. It is a most unpleasant, acrid, slightly warm smell, really very unpleasant. And one keeps forgetting not to walk past them, but as soon as you do, you have to cross over and in some extraordinary way the smells rise and go in through the flat windows that face out on the west side. And in fact, the smell actually wafts through over a flat roof into Cheltenham Terrace.
So, given the fact it's the fabric of the building that is contributing to the problem, the guys have spent money on trying to solve the problem. But is there a possibility that somebody could come up with another solution as to where it's vented?
Can I just interject here as well, please? I think it would be helpful to focus on how the smells relate to the application, which is for the extended hours, because obviously the applicant has what they hold and we can't take away what they've got. So we need to focus on, I mean, obviously smells has been covered quite extensively earlier on, and obviously there's no responsible authority here, but obviously it is subject to a licensing condition. But can you focus on how the smells would relate to the extended hours? I think that's what's important here, please.
Well, I think extended hours presumably means more people, which means more cooking, and therefore more smells.
Okay, thank you so much. We're not finished, but I'm just going to take a 10-minute adjournment for a comfort break. So everyone, we're going to adjourn for 10 minutes. Thank you so much.
everyone please stand for the committee?
Welcome back, everybody. So I'm just going to go back to questions from the committee. Are there any more?
I was just, one of the queries I had was, as you are the freeholders, whether or not you sought sanction through the lease to address the smell issue.
The answer is no. Whitelands House, WHCL, Whitelands House Chelsea Limited, own the whole of the Whitelands House estate, which includes the car park, the row of shops and the restaurant, the row of shops along the King's Road. Long leases had been granted prior to enfranchisement to Martin's Properties, who in turn grant subleases to the shops and including the restaurant. That's how it works. So one would have to go through Martin's Properties.
And you've spoken to Martin's Properties, have you?
Martin's Properties used to own the freehold, and in 2013, Whitelands House Chelsea Limited, comprising the flat owners, the leaseholders, bought the freehold and formed themselves into a company.
Thank you.
Councillor Hudd, do you have a couple?
Yes, just a very brief question. Ms. Freckerly, I'm just trying to establish something on the sound. You said that or maybe Ms. Carruthers said that, the music and the dancing was more underground. So, do you have any complaints on the sound from the music at all?
The sound, sorry, the sound.
The noise. So
no,
the noise from the music.
No, you can't hear it from outside.
No. Okay. All right. Okay. That's lovely. And no, I think that's it for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So just one more clarification to do with the smells. So with the complaints, no one's been into any of the residential properties to double check?
Not to my knowledge, no.
Okay, thank you. And then also, so I just want to make it clear, the general issue is about dispersal, the noise caused by dispersal. How is it currently at the times that it is already? How do you find it on a day-to-day basis?
Okay, at the weekends, I mean, there's constant noise, but at the weekends it tends to be louder and more because there's more people and in the premises that are coming out. During the day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're not busy. At night, to be fair, probably by 9:30 most people are gone and you're not in bed, so it's not a problem. The main issue is when it starts Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and cars arriving, people coming late after 9:30 because, as I said, they have music, it's a nice place to go. It's a young crowd of people, mainly girls, some boys. I mean, when I say boys and girls, adults over their 20s. So they come there for a different purpose. They're not actually eaters. The eaters come at 7:30 because you can't get a table after 7:30. That's when they book, and then according to them it's 2 hours stay. Normally they're much faster than that, in my experience, depending how busy they are. But yeah, so it's mainly the weekends, and that's when you need your rest the most.
May I briefly supplement that? Because Councillor, you just touched on a broader issue that we are in some discussion with our councillors and indeed the licensing team about, which is that there is a question as to when does the residential neighbourhood quieten down, and one can't pin the entire issue on Ixchel. There are literally hundreds of new covers that have been installed in and around Duke of York Square, for example, very nearby to this site, and there are more coming with 3 new restaurants, the resurrection of the old Gallery restaurant and 2 new ones. And those people go somewhere. Yes, a lot of them do head up and down the King's Road, but a lot of them do walk back and forth through these very same residential streets. We have all experienced over the last, I've been there 30 years now, we've all experienced an increase in human noise in the evening that is not good for human health insofar as sleeping is important for all of us. And when people are talking and shouting or doing what they do, sleep is not easy because these streets are organised so that the sleeping areas upstairs are very close to the pavements. Now, the concern that we've got is at the moment we at least do get some reduction in that noise round about 12:15 each night, because the people who currently leave the licensed premises, of which there are many, as I've said, at 11 o'clock, 11:30, or in 1 or 2 cases midnight, go. What we are, and I've used this word before, I'm sorry to use it again, petrified about, is the prospect of a door being opened to the breach of the policy that's currently in place to protect us in those respects. That's what this application is doing. I'm sorry that it is Ixchel doing it, because as I said, no one has anything against the quality of the food they serve there, but we just don't think this is the right place to breach the policy.
Just to kind of go back, they did say that it's seated only, so their customers are restaurant users. Are you saying that that's not the case after 9:30 or whenever the block booking seems to cease?
What I'm saying is they do eating early hours of the evening around 7:30 or 8 o'clock depending on their bookings, but later at night it is not dining, in my experience, what I've seen. It is standing at the bar, they can sit at the table maybe, drink or go downstairs, but food is not served. I mean, nobody wants to eat late at night anyway, so, and the clientele that is going there obviously are there for their tequilas to drink, by the way, it's very good, but that's it, you know, you just have to visualize it.
Can I ask roughly how many people in your experience when you've been there have you seen standing around, maybe sort of dancing on average as a ballpark?
Standing is more downstairs than upstairs. Upstairs they do have standing, but you can see it through the curtains, so it's more downstairs. And when they're busy, it's full. It's busy. You know, there's people eating. They have a very long table downstairs, so where the music plays, there is a space and there's a bar. So as I said, it's nice music. I'm not disputing that, but it's not sort of eating. It's drinking and having a good time. So.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from you guys? No. Okay. So now, any questions from our legal officer?
Just one question. I just wanted you to clarify. So your concern seems to be you think the extended hours aren't really going to be for eating. You think they're going to be more about alcohol consumption, but obviously the current conditions only allow, I think it's 40 people to stand before or after having eaten. Is that what you think? It's going to be more about drinking than eating? You think people are going to linger longer after having had their meal, albeit seating drinking and standing drinking?
Well, if you're being encouraged by formal advertisements to come to a tequila bar till late on those nights, then the probable answer would be yes. Secondly, even if it was only 40, that's 40 people who have to disperse later than any other dispersal going on from any other outlet in the area, because everybody else has complied with the midnight policy. Those are our concerns, and what happens when people are dispersing at that time of night, when hopefully it is quiet. I mean, if we have people leaving at 1:30, they don't actually leave the area till closer till 2. By 5 o'clock, other things start happening, refuse trucks and the rest happening. When is there going to be the delivery of the very thing the Midnight Policy was designed to produce, which is a quiet time for residents in residence areas. That's our concern. This is why you find the application so difficult to comprehend. But I leave it there.
Also, sorry, can I mention there are 2 other Mexican restaurants, one on King's Road and one is off King's Road, and they're not open till late. So, why this one?
Okay. Now, any questions from the applicant?
Yes, please, just a few. Can I start with Mrs. Fikele first? Whilst you were talking and asserting to the committee that the last booking at these premises was 7:30, I did some Googling. And I went to Open Table, and this evening, for example, the last table they've got is 9:30 because the rest of it is booked. If you wanted to book later, for the 20th of December, for example, you could get a booking for 10:30 in the evening. I just wouldn't want the committee to get the wrong impression.
I'm sorry, but I checked before I said, and that's not the case. So I don't know which table you're looking at, but I looked at their own website, and it's 7:30, and they're open next Saturday at 8 o'clock.
I have looked at 7 rooms. I personally Googled 7 rooms.
The council can look at them themselves. I looked on their website, so yeah, Excel website.
And I have personally Googled Open Table. Okay. And I have found that far from being 7:30 as the last reservation, on, for example, the 20th of December, the last reservation is 10:30 in the evening. Now, I'm not making that up. That is true.
I've got it on my screen. 7:30.
For what day?
Okay.
For what day, please?
21 December.
Okay, we'll check ourselves. But thank you. We've taken both sides for that. But yes, any more actual questions?
Mr. Huntley, we take issue, I'm afraid, with quite a lot of what you've said. The first is Mr. Manoli, and I think it's being suggested that Mr. Manoli doesn't exist. Is that what's being said?
No, that's not what was said. What I said was that there's nobody living in Cheltenham Terrace with that name. I did actually identify somebody who is a real person with that very name spelt rather unusually, and that real person, as far as we can see it, is the chief operating officer of a nightclub group in London. That's fine, we're nothing against that. Quite why he's supporting this operation that doesn't want to be a nightclub and purporting it would seem to live in Cheltenham Terrace was the point I was raising.
Well, he doesn't purport to live in Cheltenham Terrace. He lives in Whiteland's house, number 14 Whiteland's house, which has an entrance on Cheltenham Terrace. He, and I'm looking at his council tax bill from Kensington and Chelsea. If you want to check that is his address. I hope that you'll take it from me that he exists and that he lives in a building that is situate in Cheltenham Terrace.
Fine, thank you for that. I will check it out when I get back.
Secondly, Mr. Huntley, I have to say there's concern on this side of the room in relation to your assertion that you were the only person that was alerted to the meeting of the 4th of November, 2024.
I was the only person who received the Zoom or Teams invite. I cannot say whether anybody else wasn't or was not informed, but I can say that the people sitting around me today weren't. And you're hearing it again across the table here. I was the only one who got the Zoom invite, but we must separate out what the licensing team did with that meeting sponsored by the councillors from what Ixchel is meant to do which is a point I was making earlier on. That's the distinction I'm drawing here.
Yeah, I'm going to make this assertion on behalf of Mr. Carruthers, and it's this, that every single residents' association that is identified in condition 33 was notified of the meeting of the 4th of November 2024.
Well, Whitelands House Residents Association certainly wasn't.
This is another factual issue which you're entitled to invite the council to draw the conclusion that you do, provided the factual foundation is correct. It's obviously in dispute, and I raised earlier the need for it to be clarified. If you can identify the emails that went to all of the associations specified in condition 33, together with the invites to those Zoom meetings, then we can get to the bottom of this. But I can't assist any further today. I was the only person there, and nobody else involved in this matter appears to have received a notice.
But it may be that the licensing officer can assist us with details of all of the other residents' associations that were included in that email.
I still don't understand, and I'm sorry if I'm not being obtuse. We were expecting Ixchel to comply with condition 33. We weren't expecting the licensing team to comply on Ixchel's behalf. There is a distinction there.
It may be that it's a distinction without a difference. The point of the condition is to get everybody around in the same room, whether it's physically in the same room or remotely. That's the point about the condition, isn't it?
Well, I hear your point, but I would disagree. I think
your complaint is this, that Ixchel didn't physically organise the whole of that meeting.
My complaint, and the point I was making earlier, was that in order for this to work, Ixchel were meant to notify a specified number of associations. They were meant to put a notice in their window for other patrons or residents who were interested to be aware of a meeting, when, where and how it would take place. And then they were supposed to prepare minutes so they could be circulated to the community. I don't think it can be suggested that any of those things happened.
I am going to suggest that all of those residents' associations were notified. And not only was that done for the 4th of November, it was also done for the 28th of November, when nobody turned up.
Well, I've already explained why no one turned up the 28th of November. There's no dispute about that. I think it's a factual matter. I'm repeating myself to you. We need to see the evidence that you're purporting to rely on. But let me ask you this, if I may, and I simply respond by saying this. None of us, at any time, in respect of any of these meetings, received the minutes that Ixchel was supposed to prepare for residents to consider.
That I will accept, but I do not accept on behalf of Mr. Carruthers.
And nobody saw a notice, except potentially in the last 10 days, in the midst of what we're doing here today. We've never seen the notice before that in the window saying there's a meeting. The concern we have here is not to be nitpicking. It's about whether or not Ixchel have demonstrated, my concern was whether they demonstrated that they are the sort of people who understand the importance of conditions and will comply with them.
I'm conscious about time, and I want you, please, first of all, were you alerted that any of these temporary events notices were taking place?
No, Ixchel did not tell us until we spoke to Mr. Varani and we got some insight from him. We discovered that they were being applied for through our own endeavours with the local authority. That's a further shortfall, we would say, in the kind of transparency of communication that as residents we were looking for.
Every single one of them was posted in the window.
We were told about that by Mr. Varani, and we pointed to him to show that they've been put in the bottom left corner of the window. Is this working properly, or is it just me shouting at it? They were put in the bottom left corner of the window where nobody would actually see them. So he agreed to put them in a more prominent position. They didn't happen.
At Appendix F is the list, and this is on page 75 of our agenda papers, of all the temporary events notices.
Mm-hmm.
Will you please identify which of those did not take place?
No, I'm not going to sit here and plough through them and resuscitate each particular evening when any one of us walked through. That's a rather, with respect, churlish thing to ask me to do on the hoof. What I've said is that we knew that there were many tents being applied for, and we went to look on various nights that I cannot now recall on the top of my head, when we did not see activities taking place. I don't think it's a fair question to say point to which ones on this piece of paper.
Do you see the point here?
No, I don't.
Can I just ask the question?
Please do. You asked me a question, I said, no, I don't see the point. That's my answer.
Let me please ask the question, and then you can respond to it. The point is a simple one. You make a broad assertion that many of these did not take place. And you've been careful to point out to the committee that there must be some foundation, some evidential foundation for any assertion that's made, even in a meeting such as this. You say that many of these didn't take place.
We say many of them didn't take place.
You say that.
We have said that many of them did not take place.
And I say, which ones? What is unfair about that?
No, if you wish me to go away and investigate the diary and look at the particular evenings when we walked around, all of us, not just me, we will collate together our respective best recollections of the evenings. It is not unreasonable to ask you to accept, unless you wish to test the veracity of what we're saying, that we went out on various occasions when these many tens were being promoted to see whether anything was happening. And there are many of them. And no one would reasonably sit here now and be able to regurgitate each particular one that we checked out was not happening.
You've already said that you weren't aware that they were happening.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that. What I said was that we weren't aware they were being applied.
Can we move on? That we're kind of stressing the point here. I understand. We understand.
Now, what is clear is that both sides, in order for this to work, have to work together. That's perfectly clear. Now, will this come as any comfort to you? If Mr. Carruthers was to pare back his application and was to say to you, all right, we won't go for Thursday. We'll amend our application so that it's Fridays and Saturdays only. Does that come as any comfort?
I want to mention one thing besides answering your own question now. Why is Mr. Gonzalez not present at this meeting? If you want to start a relationship with the residents' associations, why is he not present today? Because I called him when I heard he was the new manager, and I did tell him that as Walpole Street we have concerns, and he then decided to call this meeting on the 28th of November, and he had no input from his management. So the question you're asking at the moment doesn't warrant us to feel confident enough that you're going to stick to the rules, because you haven't so far. Thank you.
So back to Mr. Huntley. Does that come as any comfort to you if Mr. Carruthers cuts back his application on Fridays and Saturdays?
As I mentioned much earlier today, my most important hat here today is as a representative of about 12 resident associations who engage in dialogue about these things, and as Ms. Stevens has said, expect the association to then communicate their broad consensus. It's never perfect, but there usually is a broad consensus, and there's a very strong one, I'm afraid to say, in relation to Rickshaw. I wouldn't feel comfortable giving you an answer today on behalf of all of them without consulting. I will undertake to consult, for sure. That's my job. I apprehend that it's taking something that is bad and just making it less bad, but it doesn't become good.
And what about this? If he amends his application so that it is until 1 o'clock only, so there wouldn't be that additional half an hour until 1:30. Does that come as any comfort?
Can I make a counter proposal? I'll answer your question in this way. What we will do, despite the history and the rather fraught relations that, in my experience, uniquely this operation has generated with the residents. I've never seen anything like this one before. We will be willing, if you want to pause on this application, to sit down and work through with you whether there is any compromise that we can come up with that satisfies the residents, from whom I can't just speak here. I have no right to do so for all of them, and there are many in those 12 associations. I would suggest it's in the Ixchel's interest to do that, because if Ixchel genuinely wants to restore relations with the residents, the best way of doing it is not to take a chance on what this committee will do, but actually to adjourn, or to ask the committee to adjourn, and to work through with this and see if we can come up with something that might be an acceptable compromise.
And what about this as a possible compromise? The suggestion from the committee that there be 2 SIA as opposed to 1. Does that come as any comfort?
I'm so sorry, just one moment.
Mr. Rankin, can I just check, when you say 1 a.m, is that close time, or is that because obviously you're asking for licensable activities till 1 for...
That would be closing time.
Okay, so would the licensable activities then go back half an hour because of the drinking up? condition?
Yes, they would.
So on sales of alcohol and late night refreshment would end at 12:30, and with the 30 minutes drinking up, that would take you to a 1 a.m. close on Fridays and Saturdays.
Exactly.
With 2 SIA.
With 2 SIA, one of whom can walk down Walpole Street.
Just to therefore come back to your question, I was being counselled on my left in exactly the terms that I anticipated, which is that on this particular application there are too many residents and too many associations who would need to be consulted. So I'm grateful for any opportunity to consult and confer and see if we can compromise without making any promises. And I don't think I can do better than that today, councillors.
Very helpful, thank you.
Are you able to advise on your own residents' association behalf, but not the others, just out of interest?
No, I coordinate the interaction between the 12 associations on matters that affect them generally. So we don't deal with single issues that only affect a particular street, but this issue does affect all of them because they're concerned about the midnight policy and the points I've made. So for that reason, the short answer to your question is yes, absolutely.
Can I just say something about Mr. Gonzalez? There's no subterfuge in the fact that he's not here. He worked last night. I didn't ask for him to be here, but I haven't kept him away from the committee because we have anything to hide. He's at the end of a telephone and he can be brought here if needs be, but I imagine that all of the evidence that Mr. Carruthers has given effectively covers our application.
It doesn't fill us with confidence, if I can just make that point. He was slated on the papers to be here today. He's the third manager in 18 months. He really ought to get on top of what we're saying here today if we're going to have confidence in this operation having an extraordinary licence.
Are there any final questions? Anyone in the chamber?
No questions.
Okay. Anyone else? Committee? Go ahead.
Ms. Rankin, this is more for you. Would you take on board that there has been an absolute breakdown of communications between Excel management and the residents? And from hearing the residents, both parties have done thorough investigation, but obviously, they feel that you have not been consulting enough or even collaborative enough to hear the complaints. Would I be right in assuming that?
If we took out the word absolute breakdown, then
Okay.
is that certainly there are offences that need to be mended. There's no question about that.
Right.
And we hear loud and clear what the residents have to say, and we shall use our level best to endeavour to mend those fences. But we need a little bit of give from the other side as well.
Right.
The powers to review the licence are well known to you. I'd be in a very difficult position if I came before you and there was an application to review these premises and I was suggesting that we'd mended fences when clearly we hadn't. We have to do this. We must do it.
Thank you, Mr. Rankin. And just my apologies, Mr. Huntley, I've been referring to you as Mr. Manuel. My apologies, I'm so sorry.
I'm absolutely not offended, but thank you.
Sorry, thank you.
Thank you. I just wonder whether the applicants could actually take an undertaking to review the problem with the smell. I realise that you've done work, but clearly it hasn't worked, and it is one of the main objections.
It is one of those matters which is foremost on our minds. It isn't that we have just decided to fold our arms and say, well, there's nothing more we need to do because the licensing enforcement officers don't think that there is a problem. We shall continue to keep it under review, and if some piece of kit appears that is going to make these extractor fans even more efficient, then obviously we shall buy those.
I think that Ms. Stevens actually indicated that there is a length within the the garage area, I'd ask you to look at that as a possible solution.
Thank you for that.
Can I help on a point of fact on that? I won't dwell on it, but I'm aware that has been investigated already, and there are reasons I won't go into as to why it's difficult to utilise that space. What's in the garage area is actually air conditioning extractors or vents. They're the ones looking after the conditioning in the space. All of the smell venting is coming horizontally out onto the street. Some of it blows through grills into the garage, some blows over the garage into Cheltenham Terrace, but they all come from that first place on the ground level.
Thank you. Okay, at this stage I'd like to ask our legal officer to deal with the draft conditions and any other queries she may have.
Thank you. Has everybody seen the draft conditions which were circulated yesterday?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, are we going to proceed on the basis of Friday and Saturday nights, licensable activities until 12:30, closing at 1, and 2 SIA? We're going to proceed on that basis. Thank you. Right. Existing condition 20, I think it's duplicated as part of condition 31. Are you happy just to tidy up the licence and have that removed?
Yes.
Thank you. Right, everybody can chip in here if they've got anything to say. Going to the additional conditions suggested by the applicant, 32. So earlier on, you suggested amending existing condition 32 so that it says from 2200 hours until midnight each day, no more than, I think you said 15.
But we could drop that down to 10.
10 smokers from the premises shall be permitted to smoke outside the premises at any one time, and a member of staff will monitor them at regular intervals. And after midnight on Fridays to Saturdays, I think it drops to 5. Is that correct? 5 from midnight until close, which would be 1. Okay. And your smoking will be on King's Road frontage only.
Can I ask whether the intention from the earlier discussion is also that when there are smokers outside, there shall be at least one or however many SICs out there with the smokers? Is that the intention as well?
We've got condition 34, which is SIAs. So it says, existing condition 32 says a member of staff shall monitor smokers, and SIAs are on duty from 10 o'clock.
My point being that in 32 the reference is to monitoring at regular intervals, which is open to very wide interpretation.
Okay,
is
so
the idea that there's a constant presence?
Okay, so any suggestions?
I think it seems to me, given the importance being put on SIA supervisors, the last sentence of 32 could read, at least one SIA licensed supervisor shall be present at all time when they're smoking outside.
Obviously from 10 o'clock when they're on duty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
On the 2 nights. Okay, Mr. Rankin, any comments on that?
Happy with that?
Okay, really good. Number 33, there shall be no new admittance to the premises after midnight. So you've cut back the hours from...
So one could say 11:30 on that.
After 23:30. Okay.
That is logical. Can I just say that that's the sort of thing that I feel we need to consult amongst the residents for me to offer any acceptance from this side of the room, the chamber I should say. So that's as far as I could go on that point today.
So you can't respond, but obviously the applicant's offered 23:30 for no new admittance.
And we note the offer, and I've noted it down. It's subject to what the committee decides. If there is to be a process or a period of engagement, we'll use that to address this sort of issue as well.
Okay. Right, moving to 34, it'd be a minimum of 2 SIA licensed supervisors shall be on duty from 10 p.m. Friday to Saturday until the last customer departs. And I put in some alternative wording. Let's have a look. A minimum of 2 SIA registered door supervisors shall be on duty. Do you want it at the main entrance to the premises? And until the customers have left the vicinity, not after the last customer departs.
I think there is only one entrance. Can we be?
There is only one
yes,
entrance.
yes.
Are they usually stationed at the main entrance, the SIAs? Then?
Yes.
Okay, so can include that. Okay. I think the councillors are just wanting, obviously, one at the entrance and one kind of ensuring that customers stay away from Walpole Street. So perhaps we can factor that into one of the wording of the conditions. Sorry, the chair wants me to reiterate this is just draft conditions in the event that the committee might, they haven't made a decision yet, so it's just...
I'm very glad you said that, because there's a lot of concern over here, and once we've breached the midnight policy, we're just concerned about coming back to you again for yet more creep. The policy is the policy.
Just standard procedure, we kind of go through this just as part of the committee hearing. Okay, so the second red paragraph, where SIA registered door site supervisors are used, a record shall be kept of their registration number, dates and times on duty. Is that acceptable? Thank you. I did scribble down a note, but it may not be relevant now that you've offered 2 SIA, about having some kind of condition about needing to risk assess whether more SIA is needed on any given event. But I'm not sure if you think S2 SIA is sufficient for 150 capacity, or whether you would be agreeable to having a risk assessment for any particular kind of event.
2 is well above the standard ratio that one would see.
Thank you.
Could we ask on this question of supervisors for some consideration to be given, at least while we're here, to these conditions for SIAs to be in place whenever a 10 is being enjoyed? I mean, those are late night activities that desperately need these sorts of protections as well. Is that possible?
Sorry, you want them to be what? Sorry, I didn't catch what you said.
So the existing 10s,
yeah,
which fall outside of this, when there is a 10 till 1 or 2 a.m., can we, or are we willing to agree that these provisions should apply to those activities as well?
It's a bit tricky because obviously the premises user who puts in the application, unless it comes to a committee hearing, you can't apply existing conditions from the licence to the 10, when we could add an informative. Just see what Mr. Rankin's thoughts on that are.
What was the question?
Sorry, I think Mr. Huntley's saying that if you hold a 10, he wants assurances that all the existing licence conditions are going to apply to the 10, but obviously each 10 is a separate application, and obviously unless it comes before the committee, then there's no guarantee that that will happen. But as an informative, would you be agreeable to all conditions of the licence theoretically applying to the 10?
It's difficult. I think what Mr. Huntley is saying was, would you please have SIA for temporary events notices? And to that I can say yes.
Okay.
But sometimes, for example, a temporary events notice may be applied for where there's a wedding reception, for example, where people might be standing up, and so on and so forth. And so I can't give a blanket undertaking to comply with all of the conditions on the premises licence when there is a temporary events notice taking place.
Just to help you on that, if I may, you're correct that the focus of our concern is on the external aspects. We're willing again to discuss which of the conditions that address the internal position might sensibly apply. But this is actually a goodwill point. If you really want to show the residents you want to address the nuisance issues, they will arise in respect of 10s just as much as they might in respect of a Friday night. hence the request.
Yes, we're happy to give an undertaking to have SIA door staff whenever a temporary events notice is taking place. And if Mr. Huntley is able to identify a specific condition that he would wish to be adhered to, then that can be the subject of discussions later on and correspondence later on. But here and now, I can't give that blanket undertaking.
I obviously can't condition this, but I can add this as an informative and write it into any full decision that you're willing to give an undertaking to have 2 SIA on the TENS nights and to agree certain conditions with the applicant, with the objectors for those TENS. Mr. Huntley?
I think I said everything I'm empowered to say, Chair. Thank you. Solicitor, thank you very much. Yes.
Right, okay. A copy of the premises licence shall be provided to any company providing security. Is that okay? Thank you. Then turning to my 3 additional conditions, obviously a common sense approach will be taken to the interpretation of 35. The premises will not operate as a nightclub, discotheque or similar venue. I think that just safeguards or makes it clear the applicant's intentions that it's not going to be used as a nightclub, and obviously they've said that they're not going to be applying for regulated entertainment, and obviously they can play background music after 11 p.m. because obviously it's deregulated up until 11 p.m. Is everyone okay with that condition?
Yes.
Thank you. Number 36, all reasonable steps shall be taken to stop customers congregating on the highway outside the premises. So that will be Walpole Street and King's Road.
Happy with that.
And obviously...
Sorry, can you please specify Walpole Street and King's Road on that?
You want it specifically mentioned?
Specifically mentioned, and should apply for TENS as well. So every single night should be the same.
Yeah, you can have that as part of the discussions with to add to the TENS informative.
Should it include Cheltenham Terrace as well?
And Cheltenham Terrace on the other side?
People tend to walk there and fight. I haven't seen them congregating yet. So I think we're
good. You're happy with just the 2?
I think that's good enough, yes.
Okay, obviously we have to be proportionate. Thank you.
Agreed.
Number 37, no alcohol. Your on sales, obviously it doesn't include any forecourt area, so it's just inside the premises. So no alcohol or other drinks shall be taken from the premises in an open container. So for example, when people go outside smoking, no drinks are to be taken outside. Can I just have your view on that, please?
But my concern is the point that was raised by Mr. Williams earlier about the outside area on the suspended parking bays during the summer months. And if one used wording such as save for areas covered by a premises license, a pavement license under the Business and Planning Act 2020, then at least that's a condition which we wouldn't have to vary at a later date.
I think we've used that wording before. Okay, thank you. Right, other things I just scribbled down. The existing residence meeting condition, which number's that?
33, I think you'll find.
Sorry, 33. I just wondered whether we need to, so you're required to directly notify the ward councillors and the Whitelands House Residents Association, Franklin's Row Residents Association, Walpole Street Residents Association and Duke of York and Royal Air Hospital Area Residents Interest Group of the meeting date at least 2 weeks before the meeting. So is that covers all the RAs to be notified? There's no one missing from that?
Correct.
Sorry.
I think we should also just check that Ixchel have got all the right details for the names of the chairs of the various residents associations.
Perhaps
that's
you
something
could
for them.
liaise directly afterwards or via licensing. That will be helpful. Sorry, just bear with me. Sorry. I was concerned that the ward councillors weren't included, but they are included in that condition. I think in terms of the residents' meeting, what about putting a physical notice up, perhaps in Whitelands House or in the window? So I'm just checking to see what it says at the moment. The details of the proposed meeting should be clearly displayed on a window or door. So you've already got to put a notice in the window or door. Would you like a notice put in Whitelands House?
I think there are two answers to that. The first is the word clearly. As I said before, the evidence we had was that it was stuck in the bottom corner, which wouldn't be seen by most people, if anybody. So if we can clarify that clearly means at head height in the window, so everyone knows it's happening, so you can see it. And then secondly, I'm not sure it's easy for somebody to walk into Whitelands House and just post a notice. There are porters there who will stop that from happening, but again, if the chair of the association sitting on my left, Mrs. Stephen, is given a copy of the notice, I think
that's sufficient for her to
that can check, but can you say?
Okay. Well, yes, I would expect an email from Ixchel to notify me of a meeting. That's all I need.
You just need to make sure that everybody's got the email
maybe
addresses.
these signs were put on the window, but they're right at the bottom, and you don't go down the road looking in the corners. So maybe that's where they were, but nobody saw them, you see. The chairs have to be contacted directly, I would have thought, by email.
Lindsay, I think that one of the issues is that if their meetings are by Zoom, actually you have to send an email, because otherwise people don't have the details of how to join the meeting.
Well, the notices can put a link in there which you can type in and get access to the Zoom meeting. So it can be done, and in fact it is done, provided the details are there. But I take the point, Councillor, which is you need to take an image of it or photograph it or make a very careful note. On the whole, when the associations are properly informed, they do inform the residents, and if the notice says the meeting is going ahead, nearly every resident who is interested knows of their association and where to go to ask for further information if they don't already know. So I think it should be sufficient, not perfect.
Would it be helpful if maybe, I don't know, if it was at regular intervals, so maybe every 3 months, every 6 months, and you know it's going to be on a certain date, so then at least you know what you're looking out for when there is a residents' meeting coming up. So you could both sort of know this is the kind of date we're looking at, and you could liaise, and it will still be in the window, and you'll still get your emails, but at least you're already aware roughly when they would occur.
The difficulty with having too many meetings is that you get what happens on the 28th of November and nobody turns up. Is it better to leave it as it is and have at least 2 meetings a year and such other meetings as may be from time to time called between the premises licence holder and the Residents' Association?
Just for goodwill purposes, I would like to have a bit more structure, just so we can have that good bridge building thing that you want.
Are you talking about notification of the existing meetings? I don't think she's necessarily talking about extra meetings. I'm talking about
either notifications or having a structured meeting. So at a pre-scheduled show, we know that they're all going to have this communication time.
So you're wanting advance notification of these meetings?
And possibly more, because they haven't received, there's been as a goodwill thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the issue of making sure that everybody's got the correct email addresses, but also you're wanting advance notification of the existing meetings.
Well, if it helps.
We could specify months. We could say during May and during November, so that everybody knows that that is when a meeting must take place.
Unless otherwise agreed in writing. Mr. Huntley?
It sounds great. In practice, some of the attendees will be away in May or need to readjust the timing. I thought the original proposal was a bit more flexible, but we can agree anything. There is the proviso already there in condition 33 that the associations can waive the requirement for a meeting in writing if they think everything is hunky-dory, should that ever happen.
Okay, I mean, the committee can go away and take a view on it. I think they're just concerned that everybody's aware of the meetings.
We really welcome that initiative and sentiment. It's important to us.
Thank you. Let me just have a think. Just bear with me, please. Where's my bit of paper? So if we're concentrating on Friday and Saturday nights, and alcohol and late night refreshment finishes at midnight, I think one of the concerns was about it being about drinking, not being about eating. When's your proposed last sitting if you were to get 12:30 licensable activities terminal hour?
Just before 11. There's a condition, obviously, there's a restaurant condition, and any alcohol has to be ancillary to any food that is consumed, and it becomes a matter of fact in each case. If somebody turns up at 6 o'clock in the evening and is still drinking at 12:30, then clearly that drink is not ancillary to his table meal.
Okay, fine. And obviously they can still drink, 40 people can still drink at the bar before and after, up until the whatever terminal hour may or may not be agreed by the council. Right, I don't think I've got any other further questions. Are there any other conditions that people think, Councillor Wade?
It's ensuring that the frontage of the premises is washed and cleaned in order to, if people are smoking there, that is all dealt with.
Just have your views on a sweeping condition and washing the pavement. How often were you thinking? A daily wash.
If people are smoking.
We do it anyway during the course of trading. Nobody in all these objections seems to be complaining about cigarette ends on the street. But as a matter of practice, we do clean during the course of our operational day and at the end of the day as well. So it may be that in those circumstances it's not appropriate to impose that as a condition.
When you say clean, do you mean wash the pavement and sweep the pavement, or just sweep?
Sweep the pavement.
Sorry, can I also mention the cigarette? I don't smoke, but what they have there is a tube, a very narrow tube, and it's not really easy to put your cigarette butts, so most of the time it's on the pavement. So could they look at putting something bigger, or two of them, because it's not user-friendly at all?
If you want us to put a second receptacle there, then of course we will. But in all of this, in all of these pages, nobody's complained about a cigarette butt.
We focused on the bigger issues. While we're on this point, I think the issue about the particular butt machine, whatever it's called, is that the particular design has a very narrow hole for someone to put a cigarette through. All that I think is being proposed is you get a slightly more user-friendly one into which a cigarette can be put more easily.
Can I just leave it as a matter for the committee?
But it's far from the biggest issue of concern that we have.
Thank you. The committee can go away and make a decision on that. Right, I think we've kind of discussed all the issues. We've discussed the... Sorry, Mr. Williams.
Thank you. Sorry, purely from a licence enforcement point of view, disposal policy has been discussed. There's no condition on the licence regarding disposal policy or compliance to, just for you to think about.
Okay, so obviously that has been talked about quite a lot during this hearing. I think normally we our standard condition, just bear with me 1 second. Our standard condition is that the applicant submits a dispersal policy to the licensing authority for them to look at, not necessarily sign off, but to look at. If you just bear with me, I can find the standard condition. If you can just, if you're amenable to sharing a dispersal policy, I'll just have your views.
It has been circulated.
It has?
Yes.
But it's not conditioned, that's what I mean.
We're happy it's a condition.
You're happy to condition a dispersal policy, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Hudd? Right, I think we've pretty much covered all the ground on the conditions. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you. And our licensing officers, anything to add?
Sorry, my mic's not working.
Okay, thank you. And our governance officers, anything to add? No. Okay, thank you. We have reached the end of this meeting. The committee now has all the information needed and we will retire to make our decision in private session. We will not announce the decision today. Instead, the hearing will be closed. A summary determination will be sent to the parties within 5 working days of today's hearing, and a full decision will follow as soon as possible thereafter. The time limit for appealing the decision will not commence until the full decision has been sent out to the parties. Thank you all for attending. This hearing is now closed. Thank you.